Chapter 76. Ron's eyes were filled with a deep hatred. Seeing Wharton's gaze, he didn't shrink back and looked at him. It's him. It can't be. It's actually him? That idiot who tipped 20 gold coins in one go? A 10-year-old child actually alarmed a powerhouse from the sacred domain of the Holy See? That's impossible, right? The mercenaries' eyes were filled with a trace of surprise when they saw Ron step forward. They would never have thought that a 10-year-old who still looked like a child would be personally captured by a powerhouse from the sacred domain. Looking at him, it seemed like there was some deep hatred between them. I've finally found you, Ron. Wharton's lips curled into a slight smile. I thought you would hide like a coward for the rest of your life. Ron took a deep breath and looked Wharton up and down. He said in a low voice, "What exactly do you want?" Wharton smiled. "It's very simple. Lay down your weapons and surrender. Come back with us and accept the judgment of the court." Accept the judgment of the court? Ha ha! Ron was so angry that he laughed. He stopped laughing and gritted his teeth. Why? What makes you think you can judge a person's life and death? Yes, I practice necromancy, but what makes you think that people who practice necromancy are heretics? At this moment, the mercenaries suddenly realized that the Holy See was here to hunt down heretics. No wonder they had mobilized so many people. However, it seemed like they were making a mountain out of a molehill to make such a big fuss over a necromancer. Some of the mercenaries looked at Ron with sympathy in their eyes. They thought to themselves, this guy could have learned anything, but he just had to learn necromancy, the most disliked of all. Not only did he offend the Holy See, he's also useless. What a fool! Wharton's face darkened. He was about to teach Ron a lesson. He never liked to talk nonsense with his enemies. Just as he was about to make a move, someone suddenly jumped out from the side. "How dare you?" Diallo's tone was high. "You damned heretic! What right do you have to speak to Lord Wharton in such a tone?" He then turned around and bowed to Wharton. "Lord Wharton, please allow me to teach this arrogant fellow a lesson." Wharton thought for a moment, smiled faintly, and nodded gently. "Go. If you can't handle it, don't come back to see me." Diallo was overjoyed. Wharton, noncommittal, went to a nearby table and leisurely sat down to read a pornographic novel. "And this mercenary station will be your burial ground." Ron didn't think much of it, but Hamelin, who was in the soul ring, was about to explode in anger. Humble? Dirty? Despicable? When the Scourge Church ran amok in Amrose, who knows where the Holy See was? This guy actually dares to spout nonsense in front of me? Hamelin was so angry that his beard blew and his eyes widened. He hated it when others looked down on the great necromancy magic. Boom! At this moment, a strong fiery light erupted from Diallo's body. The flames burned fiercely, making him look like a man on fire. 2 large wings made of flames slowly spread out behind him, gently flapping. Wings of flame. This guy is a master-level powerhouse? The surrounding mercenaries' eyes flashed with shock. The Holy See's strength was indeed unfathomable. Even a random person from their ranks was a master-level powerhouse. Diallo, a mid-level great swordsman, cultivated fiery do-chi. His attacks carried blazing heat. Even in the Holy See, where experts were as common as the clouds, there were few who could match him. Diallo seemed to be deliberately showing off. He spread his 2 wings of flame to the maximum. Looking at Ron's slightly pale face, he was very pleased with himself. He's just a master-level powerhouse. I'll take him down in 3 minutes. Hamelin snorted in dissatisfaction. Ron, your body is too weak. I can't beat that Holy Domain powerhouse, but taking care of that guy is as easy as playing. Step aside and let me do it. I'll teach him a lesson this time. I'll let him know the power of necromancy magic," Hamelin said angrily. Without waiting for Ron to respond, Wharton frowned. "Stop fooling around. Take care of him and go back early." "Yes, sir." Diallo's heart trembled. He knew that he had gone too far and angered Sir Wharton. He raised his head and looked at Ron. With a smile, his whole body rose into the air. Rise into the air? He can fly. Ron was a little panicked. It's nothing. All master-level powerhouses can fly, Homelin said in a deep voice. He's about to attack. Die. Diallo's eyes shone brightly. His body turned into a ray of light and pounced towards Ron. The opponent's sword carried a powerful flame power. Ron felt his body burning, as if he was about to be burned. The powerful force made him feel suffocated. Ron knew that the situation was bad. He chanted an incantation and desperately raised his bone shield, intending to block Diallo's powerful attack. It was too late to say it, but at that moment a force suddenly arrived first, blocking in front of Ron. Boom! Diallo couldn't stop in time. He slashed out with his sword and clashed with the force, creating a huge explosion. A massive wave of energy flowed out, causing Diallo to feel incredibly shocked. This power was far greater than he had expected, and as soon as he came into contact with it, he was forced back. What? Diallo's eyes widened in disbelief. At that moment, he clearly saw that the powerful force was released by a small thing. That small thing was a chicken bone. A chicken bone that had been gnawed by someone. He had actually forced a master-level expert to retreat with just a chicken bone. Diallo's flame-fighting aura was shaken to the point of scattering. Thump, thump, thump. He took a few steps back. He raised his head, and a trace of blood seeped out of the corner of his mouth. A look of horror flashed in Diallo's eyes. The strength of a necromancer was actually so powerful? At that moment, Wharton behind him stood up with a swish. A solemn expression hung on his face, and his eyes flashed. I wonder which sacred domain powerhouse has graced us with his presence. Please come out for a moment. Sacred domain powerhouse. Ron was stunned. Apart from Wharton, who was a sacred domain powerhouse, there were no other sacred domain powerhouses here. Homelin smiled and said slowly, "It's that old drunkard. He made a move." "It's him?" Ron's eyes fell on the old drunkard who had just taken 20 gold coins to buy wine. He rubbed his eyes, and a look of disbelief appeared on his face. He's a sacred domain powerhouse? He doesn't look like one no matter how I look at him. In Ron's mind, sacred domain powerhouses should be like Wharton, valiant, domineering, and looking down on everyone in the world. However, the old drunkard in front of him, who was dressed like a beggar, didn't look very powerful at all. Homelin's mouth twitched and a smile appeared on his face. The words sacred domain powerhouse aren't written on his face. That guy has the ability to conceal his aura. If he hadn't made a move, even I might not have been able to tell. Homelin continued, I just don't know what his purpose is. If he can help you, you can avoid this crisis. Ron was stunned. Are you saying that the old drunkard is stronger than Wharton of the Holy See? Homelin didn't answer directly. You'll find out soon enough. The entire mercenary station was quiet. Under Wharton's murderous gaze, all the mercenaries' hearts were thumping non-stop. They didn't even dare to breathe loudly, for fear of angering a sacred domain powerhouse. However, when they heard that there was another sacred domain powerhouse here, they were even more shocked. 2 sacred domain powerhouses. There were many practitioners in the Noah continent, but the number of people who became sacred domain powerhouses could be counted on one's fingers. Ordinary practitioners might not even see one in their entire life, but in the small Barberline kingdom, in a remote mercenary station, 2 of them suddenly appeared. Diallo was a little unconvinced at first, but when Wharton shouted the words, Sacred Domain Powerhouse, he immediately lost his will to fight. He wouldn't dare to fight a Sacred Domain Powerhouse even if he had 100 guts. He knew that if Wharton wanted to, that chicken bone would be enough to take his life. The only reason he was still alive was because Wharton showed mercy. Diallo quickly retreated to the side. In such a situation, if he said another word, he would be courting death. Diallo was very smart, and he wouldn't be so stupid. Wharton's gaze slowly swept across the mercenaries. At this moment, his gaze paused for a moment, and his body suddenly tensed up. A murderous aura was suddenly released. "It's you." Wharton's eyes narrowed as he asked in a deep voice. "Hee." The drunkard stood up and patted the dust off his body. He said to Wharton, "You still recognized me. It's not fun at all." The drunkard suddenly stood up and his eyes shone. He straightened his body, and a domineering aura was born. He didn't look drunk at all. Although the drunkard was wearing tattered clothes, it couldn't hide the aura of a powerhouse. His hands hung naturally by his side, and there was a faint smile on his face. Wharton's clumsy and threatening aura didn't affect him at all. The mercenary station was so quiet that you could hear a pin drop. All the mercenaries were stunned. This old man who had been begging for wine every day for months was actually a sacred domain powerhouse? If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they wouldn't have believed it. Some of the people who refused to pay felt nervous. Wharton's eyes were like sharp swords as he stared at the drunkard. He gritted his teeth and asked word by word, "Who are you?" "Who am I?" The drunkard chuckled. "I've been living in seclusion for a long time. I only came out recently to walk around. I'm afraid not many people remember who I am. Even I almost forgot my own name." Chapter 77. However, Diallo turned pale with fright and cried out involuntarily, "Corbett? Blue Sword Saint Corbett? Didn't you go missing? What are you doing here?" Corbett glanced at him and said coldly, "I went missing for a while, but I'm not dead." He smiled. "Perhaps many people have forgotten about me, but I didn't expect you to remember. However, you should also remember my other identity. I'm the guardian of the Kingdom of Babel." "It's him." Wharton also remembered. The guardian of the Kingdom of Babel. Corbett was the guardian of the Kingdom of Babel. He didn't have a place to stay, and even though he was the guardian of the Kingdom of Babel, he didn't accept any offerings from the Kingdom of Babel. Instead, he lived a free life. In the past 10 years, there were rumors that he had gone missing. Who would have thought that he would appear in this remote mercenary station? The Blue Sword Saint was a sacred domain expert who cultivated water-type impetus to the peak. He had a unique understanding of water-type impetus. This understanding didn't refer to his impetus, but rather his swordsmanship. His unpredictable swordsmanship combined with his powerful water-type impetus made him one of the top experts in the sacred domain. Many people respected him when they heard the name Blue Sword Saint Corbett. The Blue Sword Saint represented his impetus, but his swordsmanship was his swordsmanship. Only his swordsmanship was worthy of being called a sword saint. Corbett smiled. "I've heard of Sir Wharton before. He's one of the 9 sacred domain experts of the Holy See, and he's the Lord of the Hall of Piety. However, he's a little more hard-headed." He was referring to Wharton's actions of leading his troops into the Kingdom of Babel and ignoring their sovereignty. If the Kingdom of Babel didn't have a guardian, no one would have dared to say a word. However, the Kingdom of Babel had a guardian. Wharton naturally couldn't continue to cause trouble. Otherwise, he would have to be prepared for an all-out conflict. Even guardians wanted to save face. Wharton squinted his eyes and laughed dryly. "The Holy See was catching a heretic, and we accidentally ran into the territory of the Kingdom of Babylon. Haha, this is all a misunderstanding." Corbett nodded in agreement. "That's a misunderstanding. I like the way you put it. Well then, Mr. Wharton, take your people and leave the Kingdom of Babylon now." "Sure." Wharton did not want to have a full-scale conflict with the other party. He nodded and pointed at Ron. "I'll take this heretic away and leave." Ron's heart sank. These people still didn't intend to let him go. He clenched the bone staff in his hand and decided in his heart that as long as the other party made a move, he would fight to the death. Even if he was killed in one move, he would not sit still and wait for death. Corbett glanced at Ron and smiled. Mr. Wharton, I'm afraid I can't do that. You should know that this young man is in the Kingdom of Babel. He's also a guest of the Kingdom of Babel. If I let you take him away in our territory, what would others think of me? What would people think of the Kingdom of Babel? Ah! Everyone was shocked. They did not expect that Corbett, who was also in the sacred domain, would be so stubborn. He actually went against the Holy See in order to protect a worthless necromancer. Babel was only a small kingdom, while the Holy Roman Empire was a huge empire. Furthermore, the Holy See alone had 9 sacred domain powerhouses, while the Kingdom of Babel only had 1. Was Corbett's brain kicked by a donkey? Wharton's face darkened. He smiled coldly and said, Mr. Corbett, I have to remind you that he is a heretic. He has practiced evil necromancy magic, and must be judged by the Holy See. Corbett shook his head and refused to back down. I'm sorry, Mr. Wharton. In the Kingdom of Babel, there is no such thing as a heretic. As long as he obeys the laws of the Kingdom of Babel, he is our guest. Wharton's eyes turned sharp. So, Mr. Corbett is prepared to go against the Holy See to the end? Is it worth it for a heretic? Corbett sneered back. If that's the case, Mr. Wharton, you brought your army into the Kingdom of Babel. Are you prepared to go against me to the end? Wharton did not answer. Instead, he used his actions to show his determination. He stretched out his hand, and a beam of light shot out from his hand. Ron took a closer look and saw that it was a sword, a 2-handed dark gold longsword. A faint light flowed on the sword, not overflowing at all, giving people a feeling of restraint. It looked extremely ordinary, but Ron knew that this sword was definitely a priceless item. Ron was shocked. This is a dark gold weapon? It looks very ordinary. The brilliance is restrained, mysterious, and low-key. This is a dark gold weapon, Homelin said with a smile. This is going to be interesting. I wonder what kind of weapon that old drunkard will bring out. Looking at the dark gold high-grade sword, a strange look flashed across Corbett's eyes. He said slowly, This is a good sword, but it depends on the heart of the sword user. Is there a sword in the sword? As he spoke, he waved his hand and a burst of energy was silently released. The rusty sword lying in the corner suddenly moved and appeared in his hand. Wharton's eyes froze. The sword in Corbett's hand was an ordinary one. It was not enchanted, and its quality was not even high. It was just a low-grade weapon. You're going to fight me with this sword? Wharton said coldly. Corbett waved the rusty sword in his hand a few times and replied casually, It's enough. Wharton's body moved. At this moment, a powerful pressure was released in an instant. The surrounding space seemed to have been sealed. A scorching aura spread out in all directions. Everything in the surroundings felt as though they were being roasted in a furnace. What a powerful force! Ron felt that his body could not move. Only now did he realize the terror of a sacred domain expert. Grandpa Homelin, what is this? Domain. Homelin said in a deep voice. This is the fire elemental domain, raging inferno. This Wharton's strength is not simple. He can actually use the power of a domain. Domain. Ron was surprised. This was the first time he had heard the term domain. Grandpa Homelin, what is a domain? A domain is the pinnacle of the fire elemental law. When one's comprehension of the fire elemental law reaches the peak, a domain will appear. Ron, do you remember what I said about the power of the elements? Ron nodded, indicating that he remembered. Homelin continued, The power of the elements fills the space around us. They are everywhere. A domain is a powerful force that controls all the fire elements in the space through the comprehension of the fire elemental law. When this force is strong enough, it will form a domain, so that's how it is. Ron nodded. At this time, he suddenly asked, Grandpa Homelin, if I cultivate to the level of a sacred domain expert, will I also have a domain? Yes. What is the name of that domain? Undead Calamity. Ron and Homelin only spoke for a moment. The powerful fire elemental domain's heatwave was oppressive. The surrounding mercenaries were afraid that they would be affected and retreated. However, they were still unable to resist the power of the fire elemental law. They bitterly endured the devastation of the fire elemental law. A domain is indeed powerful, Corbett praised. Mist appeared on his body. That was the power of the water elemental law. Surrounded by the raging flames, Corbett was completely unharmed. Wharton forced Corbett and said in a deep voice, "Sir Corbett, if it is not necessary, I do not want to fight with you. I will say it again. For a heretic, is it worth it?" Corbett coldly smiled. "Let's fight. Since it has already come to this, what else can we say?" Wharton's eyes shone brightly. "Since you want to die, I will fulfill your wish." A figure flew into the sky. Wharton raised the longsword in his hand. A large amount of fire elemental law was drawn into the air and quickly gathered on the greatsword in Wharton's hands. Raging flames, city breaking slash, the longsword hummed softly. A large amount of fire elemental law was poured into the sword, causing it to emit a special brilliance. The brilliance circulated, and Wharton's body was like a god descending to the mortal world. A powerful aura enveloped the surroundings. Boom! The mercenary station finally could not hold on any longer. Like a balloon that was constantly expanding, it suddenly exploded. The debris scattered in all directions, and the houses collapsed one after another. "Quick! The house is going to collapse. Run!" The mercenaries were not fools. Seeing this situation, if they did not escape, they would really lose their lives. The fire elemental law in the domain suddenly disappeared. All the fire elemental law was concentrated on the dark gold high-grade greatsword in Wharton's hands. Fortunately, it was such a high-grade equipment that could withstand such a powerful force. If it was an ordinary weapon, it would have already melted into slag. Die! Wharton's eyes flashed with a trace of sharpness. He raised the sword high and slashed out. Raging Flame's city-breaking slash was the ultimate version of the fire elemental law fighting technique, Raging Flame's city-breaking slash. It was filled with the elemental power of the fire domain. With a destructive aura, it violently blasted towards Corbett. Facing the blazing flames rushing towards him, Corbett was unmoved. On the contrary, a look of appreciation flashed in his eyes. What a fierce fighting technique! The Holy See, an ordinary powerhouse of the sacred domain, has such strength. It can be seen that the strength of the Holy See is indeed unfathomable. However, this kind of move is useless against me. Corbett smiled slightly. The rusty longsword in his hand slowly lifted up. Like flowing water, it drew a beautiful arc in the air. The gentleness of water and the violence of water were vividly displayed in this instant. Corbett did not have any aura around him. He seemed to be extremely casual, and the mottled weapon in his hand swung out a perfect sword strike. Sky flower water curtain. At this moment, the place where the two weapons clashed emitted a strong light. This light was so bright that it was difficult to open one's eyes. Silence. A deathly silence. There was no expected explosion, and there was no power spreading in all directions. The confrontation between the two had ended silently. This. Wharton's eyes were wide open. Even in death, he would not have thought that there would be such a strange ending. His Raging Flame's city-breaking slash was absorbed the moment he clashed with his opponent. Not even a trace of it was left. Wharton looked at Corbett in disbelief. He only felt that his opponent was like a vast ocean, boundless and unfathomable. I lost. Chapter 78. The mercenary station had long been destroyed beyond recognition. All the mercenaries looked at each other in dismay. They didn't expect a battle between two powerful beings from the sacred domain to end in such a way. Oh my God, I actually saw a battle between powerful beings from the sacred domain, one of the mercenaries exclaimed excitedly. Search for the latest updates. Yeah, that's amazing. When will I have such strength? Another mercenary said. That drunkard is amazing. Ron was also shocked by Corbett's strength. That was such a perfect sword strike. He didn't know how many times it took to perfect it. It looked like an ordinary sword strike, as if it didn't contain any power, but it was this sword strike that turned Wharton's powerful flame attack into nothingness. Although Wharton wasn't injured, he knew that he had been defeated. He had really been defeated. He had already used all of his strength, but his opponent had still been able to neutralize his technique without paying any price. Wharton knew that his opponent's strength was a level higher than his. Wharton's face was tense. Your Excellency Corbett, although I lost, that heretic is extremely important to the Holy See. I hope that Your Excellency can give me some face and let me take him away. For this, we are willing to pay a considerable price. He bowed as he spoke. Wharton already knew that force wouldn't work, so he could only use soft tactic. In this world, everything had its value. As long as the price was enough, there was nothing that couldn't be bought. The Holy See had money. In fact, it wasn't just money. The Holy See could get anything they wanted. Wharton believed that as long as he agreed, the Holy See could offer him a price that would move his heart. Corbett smiled faintly. I'm sorry, but I refuse. Wharton's face turned red and white when he heard this. He coldly said, Your Excellency Corbett, I have to remind you that going against the Holy See will not end well. You're on your own. Let's go. Wharton was straightforward. He knew that with Corbett around, there was no way he could take Ron away. Although he had brought an entire army with him, numbers were meaningless in front of the mighty ones from the sacred domain. In this world, strength was the most important thing. Although Wharton was also a fire sword saint from the sacred domain, he was still a little inexperienced in front of Corbett, who had been famous for many years. The Holy Crusade quickly retreated, and the more than 10,000 people on the periphery left in the blink of an eye. The Griffin Legion in the sky also quickly retreated, leaving no trace behind. Phew! He has finally left. The mercenaries only felt their hearts relax, as if a huge rock had been lifted off their shoulders. The invisible pressure that had been surrounding them suddenly disappeared without a trace. These people secretly rejoiced. If two mighty ones from the sacred domain were to fight to the death here, they would inevitably be affected. Corbett also breathed a sigh of relief. As the victor in the conflict with Wharton, he also didn't feel good. The Holy See was too strong. This was just an ordinary sacred domain fighter, and yet he was already so strong. However, the Holy See's strength was obviously more than that. Strictly speaking, the Holy See's Holy Crusade had entered the territory of another country without warning. Strictly speaking, it could be classified as an act of aggression. Putting aside Corbett's identity as the guardian of the Kingdom of Babarin, just the fact that Babarin was his hometown meant that Corbett would not sit idly by. Corbett was still a little worried about going against the Holy See. He wasn't worried about himself, but about the people of his hometown. If the Holy Roman Empire was determined to take revenge, the Kingdom of Babarin would definitely not be able to resist. The only possibility was to ask for help from the Roland Empire. Forget it. Since it has already happened, there's no point in thinking about it anymore. Corbett shook his head. At this time, he looked up and happened to see Ron. At this time, Ron was standing in the ruins, looking at him. Corbett smiled. Little brother, come here for a moment. Ron was stunned. You called me? The eyes of the surrounding mercenaries were filled with envy and jealousy. It seemed that this ordinary-looking young man was valued by Corbett, a powerhouse from the sacred domain. The words of a powerhouse from the sacred domain still carried a lot of weight in the entire continent. Don't worry, he means you no harm. Homelin spoke while Ron was hesitating. He had seen countless people, and he could tell what kind of person Ron was at a glance. Only then did Ron feel relieved and walked over. Corbett looked at Ron from head to toe. At this time, he had returned to his original appearance of an old urchin. He smiled and said, "Thank you for the wine. That red rose wine was really good." This time, it was Ron's turn to feel embarrassed. Corbett had defeated a powerhouse from the sacred domain, and it could be said that he had indirectly saved his life. A few glasses of red rose wine could not be compared to that, even though the wine was very expensive. "Grandpa, I should be the one thanking you. If you hadn't defeated them, I would have definitely been captured and killed by them." "It's fine, I don't like the look of these bastards either," Corbett said with a smile. "By the way, why did they want to kill you?" Corbett asked after thinking for a while. Ron sighed. "I'm a necromancer, and I'm also a heretic in their eyes, so—" "Necromancer?" Corbett widened his eyes in surprise and shook his head. "Impossible, impossible." Seeing Ron's puzzled expression, Corbett explained, "Necromancers are indeed a heretic in the eyes of the Holy See." "That's right, but the problem is, the Holy See can't possibly cross the border to hunt you down, and even mobilize powerhouses from the sacred domain. If that's the case, there are many necromancers in the Roland Empire, but I haven't seen the Holy See dispatch powerhouses from the sacred domain to hunt you down." Ron pursed his lips and fell silent. Corbett smiled. "Why, is there something that's hard to say? If that's the case, I won't ask." Ron felt that this old man was very amiable and had no ill intentions towards him. Moreover, he had just saved his life, so he said, "They said that I'm an ancient necromancer." "An ancient necromancer?" Corbett's eyes widened and his face revealed an expression of disbelief. He looked Ron up and down and nodded. "Is this true?" "Well, this explains why the Holy See dispatched powerhouses from the sacred domain, but—" Corbett thought for a while and asked hesitantly, "I've heard of the legends of the ancient necromancers, but I don't know if it's true." He looked at Ron with a burning gaze. "Ron, you come with me." "Ah? Where are we going?" Ron asked in surprise. Corbett grabbed his hand. "To a place where there's no one. I want to see if the ancient necromancy is as powerful as the legends say." Corbett was a martial arts fanatic, and had a strong interest in cultivation. He had seen necromancers in the Roland Empire and scoffed at the legends of the ancient necromancers. Now that he had the chance to see a real necromancer, his heart was already itching. He had no ill intentions towards Ron, he was just curious. Go. Let him read the necromancy novels. The magic is powerful, Hamelin encouraged in his mind. Holding Ron's hand, Corbett moved and flew into the air with a swoosh. The remaining mercenaries on the ground looked at each other. Because they were far away, they couldn't hear what the two were talking about. But when they saw that Ron was chosen by the legendary aqua blue sword Saint Corbett, their eyes were still filled with envy. The fat shop owner wanted to cry but had no tears. The mercenary station he ran was destroyed by a powerhouse from the sacred domain. Losing money was one thing, but the most difficult thing was that he didn't know how to explain it to the mercenary union. Mercenary stations were a form of cooperation between merchants and the mercenary union. The mercenary union had a huge influence as a backing. Mercenary stations were fully opened in various places to provide services to mercenaries, and a portion of the profits would be turned over every year. With countless mercenary stations across the continent, the mercenary union made a lot of money from this. Now, use your most powerful attack to attack me, Corbett said with a smile. Don't worry, Ron, I won't hurt you. Ron nodded. He took out his bone staff and softly chanted an incantation. Not long after, a dozen skeleton warriors crawled out from the ground. Corbett frowned. That's it? Summoning a bunch of useless skeletons? They don't seem to be that powerful. They're no different from those ordinary necromancers. Ron slowly raised his head and a light flashed in his eyes. He softly said, Go. The skeleton hero waved the bone axe in his hand and charged at Corbett without fear of death. Insignificant tricks. Corbett lightly waved his hand. He didn't seem to use any strength, but a formless energy was released from his hand and pushed towards the skeleton warriors. He only used half of his strength. Corbett's eyes finally revealed a look of surprise. He saw that the skeletons were as if nothing had happened. They easily defeated the energy and madly charged at Corbett. Interesting. Interesting. Corbett was excited, as if he had discovered a new continent. He increased his strength to 10%, but the skeleton warriors still managed to resist. Not only that, the axes in the skeleton warriors' hands were extremely nimble. Corbett only used 10% of his strength to deal with them. At this moment, he glanced at the other side and saw that Ron had already summoned the second wave of skeleton warriors. They were ready to attack. The ancient necromancers really live up to their reputation. Corbett chuckled and gave a thumbs up. With these skeletons, at the very least, advanced warriors won't be a match for you. Corbett exposed Ron's strength with a single sentence. Grandpa, my cultivation isn't up to par yet, Ron said embarrassedly. He tactfully stopped, and the skeleton warriors disappeared in a puff of smoke. It's already very good for you to have such strength at your age. In time, your strength will definitely improve further. I can understand why the Holy See is so nervous, Corbett said with a smile, not hiding his admiration for Ron in the slightest. But I'm curious. Ancient necromancy has disappeared for more than 100,000 years. Why would it appear in your body? This I can't tell you. Ron thought that he shouldn't tell him about Homeland's grandfather. Okay, I know you're in a difficult position. I won't ask any more. Corbett also knew that he had asked the wrong question. It was the first time they had met, so there was no need to spill all the secrets. He said with a smile, I'm looking forward to your strength. I look forward to the day you become a powerful being in the sacred domain. I have a feeling that you'll definitely be able to reach that level. Ron's face also showed a determined look. Yes, Grandpa, I'll work hard. Corbett smiled. If I'm not wrong, you're going to the Roland Empire, right? Ron nodded and didn't deny it. The Roland Empire is very good. It's much better than the Holy Roman Empire. It's known as the country with the freedom of magic. You can practice anything there, Corbett said with a smile. If you have the chance, go to the Balarax Academy in the Roland Empire to visit my granddaughter. I haven't seen her for many years. I miss her. Tell her to visit this old man in the kingdom of Barbarin when she has time. Ron nodded. If I pass by the Balarax Academy, I'll pass on your words. Okay, Ron, I won't take up any more of your time. Let's part ways here. Corbett smiled, and his body slowly floated up. With a move of his body, he disappeared into the sky with a whoosh. By the way, what's your granddaughter's name? Ron asked. Only then did he remember that he hadn't asked Corbett's granddaughter's name. He didn't know how to pass on the message. After a while, Corbett's deep voice came faintly from the distance. She's called Xia. Yeah. Chapter 79. The Balarax Academy was located in the city of Ballarak. It had a long history and occupied a large area. A long time ago, the entire city of Ballarax was the Balarax Academy. The residents of the city lived around the Balarax Academy and provided all kinds of services to its students. However, the city of Ballarax had expanded again and again. Furthermore, the Balarax Academy was no longer the only academy in the city, but also the location of the 3 great academies of the Roland Empire. Search for the latest updates here. Apart from the Balarax Academy, there were 2 other academies. They were: the Soaring Dragon Academy was the academy that had been developing the fastest recently. It wasn't inferior to the Balarax Academy in any way. The academy's most distinctive feature was the Dragon Knight. No, to be precise, the Earth Dragon Knight. They rode earth dragons into battle. Dragon Knight was a glorious title. Most of the students in the Soaring Dragon Academy had this dream and worked hard to achieve it. The Hans Academy was established several hundred years ago by a sacred domain expert who was a combination of a thief and an assassin. His name was Hans. The Hans Academy had been developing for several hundred years and was once glorious. However, compared to the Balarax Academy and the Soaring Dragon Academy, the Hans Academy seemed to be in decline. However, the thieves and assassins trained by the Hans Academy were second to none in the entire continent. The three academies of the Luolan Empire were all comprehensive institutions, not just established for a single major. For example, the Balarax Academy mainly focused on mages, but the knight, swordsman, and thief majors were also not inferior. Similarly, the Flying Dragon Academy and the Hans Academy were also the same. Every year, these academies would produce several outstanding talent. The Balarax Academy had the longest history. Its buildings were a bit old and had a heavy feeling of history. Today was the spring enrollment day of the three academies of the Roland Empire. The three academies would enroll once a year in the spring. They would all be held at the same time to compete for the best pornographic novels. It wasn't that big of a deal to recruit ordinary students, but the key was to recruit those specially recruited students, those outstanding geniuses. Recruiting one such person was more effective than recruiting 1,000 ordinary students, and the influence they could achieve was incomparable. The special admissions officers of the various academies were not to be trifled with. The extremely talented young students from all over the country had long been targeted. For this reason, the various academies had offered all kinds of conditions to attract these talented students to study. Waiving the tuition fee was only one of the lowest methods. How are the few specially recruited students that I've set my eyes on this year? Sigh, I hope they haven't been poached away by others. A wretched-looking old man, Vice Headmaster Dabbs, thought to himself as he walked. He held a thick stack of documents in his hands as he hurried to the special admissions office. The documents in his hands were all about the geniuses. If any of them escaped, it would be a great loss to the academy. Crash! Debussy was caught off guard and bumped into someone at the corner. The worst part was that the person had a cup of water in his hand and poured it all over him. Fuck, who doesn't look where they're going? Rubbing his face that was full of water droplets, Dabbus almost cursed out loud. Those important documents were all soaked. Hey, Mentor Vivian, so it's you. When he saw the person in front of him clearly, he didn't curse out loud. Instead, he looked at her with a frown. The person who had come was Vivian, a mentor of the necromancy major in the Balarax Academy. She stood to the side uneasily and apologized. I'm sorry, Headmaster Dabbs, I didn't mean to. Vivian was about 23 or 24 years old. Her beautiful black hair was tied tightly behind her head, and she was wearing a black magic robe that hugged her lithe body tightly. Her fair, egg-like face and innocent expression were lethal to any man. Vivian was the youngest mentor in the Balarax Academy. This wasn't because she was knowledgeable or powerful, but because she was in a special department, necromancy. Vivian's father had retired due to health problems and inherited the position of mentor in the academy. Her father was also a necromancer. What was surprising was that he was rather old, already in his 60s. Because he married late, having Vivian when he was 40 years old, Vivian and her father looked like grandfather and granddaughter when they stood together. Many people wouldn't believe that he was her father. The necromancy major was a well-known loser in the academy. In the 3 years since Vivian took over the necromancy major, she hadn't recruited a single student. Because of this, the higher-ups of the academy were dissatisfied. Vivian herself felt wronged. The academy's tuition was getting higher and higher, and the legends of the power of the necromancy major had already spread across the entire continent. Who would still want to learn necromancy magic that couldn't withstand a single blow? Even if they wanted to learn, the necromancers on the streets only charged 1 gold coin, and the necromancers would teach them. Anyone would know what to do. Daba lightly coughed and said to Vivian, "Vivian, your necromancy major hasn't recruited a single student in the past 3 years. In addition to your father's time, your necromancy major hasn't had a single student in 7 years. As the higher-ups of the academy, it's also very difficult for us." Dabu was using this as a pretext to make a fuss, but what he said was also true. "I'm sorry, Dean Dabu," Vivian said in fear and trepidation. "I will definitely work hard." Vivian was extremely nervous. Looking at the entire continent, there was no one who practiced necromancy magic. The Soaring Dragon Academy didn't have any. When the Hans Academy first opened, it was for a period of time, but it was later cancelled. Today, only the Balarax Academy retained this ancient major. This wasn't something to boast about. The Balarax Academy was ridiculed by the other 2 great academies. The higher-ups of the academy had always been talking about cancelling the necromancy major, and this year was the most intense. If the necromancy major was cancelled, Vivian's income would also be gone. She could only rely on her father's retirement income to live. Vivian's salary wasn't high, but compared to other necromancers, it was still considerable. Dabu shook his head, tidied up his drenched clothes, and said, "Vivian, this isn't your problem. There are necromancers everywhere outside. 1 gold coin is enough for you to learn. Adding on the strength of necromancers. You also know that the only path left for necromancy magic is research. Vivian, the higher-ups of the academy have already decided to cancel the necromancy major next year. You don't have to worry. The academy won't treat you unfairly. They will arrange a position for you to guard the library. After all, your father has been a teacher for the academy for several decades. We all know this." Dabu thought about it, and decided to announce this decision here so that Vivian could be mentally prepared. "Headmaster Dabu, you can't." Vivian became anxious when she heard this. She knew that the academy was serious. She hurriedly said, "Headmaster Dabu, I will definitely recruit students this year. Please rest assured." Dabu smiled. "It doesn't matter if you recruit or not. The higher-ups of the academy have already decided. This cannot be changed. Unless the headmaster personally says it, I think it will be difficult to change anything." Looking at Vivian's expression, Darba sighed. "Vivian, you're too weak. I'm not making things difficult for you. Think about it yourself. Is there really a need for the necromancer profession to be passed down?" He shook his head and no longer cared about Vivian. He turned and left. Vivian stood rooted to the ground. Her heart was filled with disappointment. She couldn't help but ask herself, is there really a need for the necromancer profession to be passed down? There were many legends about necromancers. Those third-rate novels that sold for a silver coin by the roadside all described them as powerful, mysterious, and terrifying. However, necromancers in reality were useless. They were not powerful, mysterious, or terrifying. Those necromancers were at the bottom of society, and their status was similar to that of beggars. Even Vivian had to admit that the necromancers in those third-rate novels were written by necromancers who were at the bottom of society and had failed to achieve their goals. They wrote so that they could fill their stomachs with 3 meals a day. It was these third-rate novels that had tricked many people into embarking on the path of necromancers. However, it was too late for regrets after learning them. Today, there was no one who came to learn these so-called necromancers. Necromancers had completely torn off their hypocritical skin. Even Vivian herself didn't have much confidence. Just then, a few voices entered her ears. It turned out that a few students had passed by and were quietly discussing. Look, isn't that teacher Vivian? TSK, what kind of teacher is she? She's just a pitiful worm trying to make a living. She hasn't even taught a single student. So it's like that. I see that she's quite a nice person. Which department does she teach? The useless necromancy department. So it's like that. The few students whispered and tried to lower their voices. However, not a single word escaped from their mouths and entered Vivian's ears. The few students chatted and soon walked far away. When they passed by her, they revealed looks of disdain. Sigh. Looking at the backs of those students, Vivian let out a long sigh. 3 years, a whole 3 years. Vivian didn't know how many people rolled their eyes and talked about her like this. She was already used to it. Even her father was the same. Among the few students he taught, most of them dropped out after a few months. There was no other reason other than that they couldn't stand all kinds of strange looks. In this world where strength was respected, those without strength would naturally be looked down upon. Compared to the other teachers, Vivian's strength couldn't even compare to that of a normal student. If it wasn't for her identity as a teacher and being protected by the school's rules, no one would dare to do anything to her. However, mocking and ridiculing, scolding and cursing, and even humiliating her in public were not uncommon. It wasn't just the students, but the teachers as well. This made Vivian's position somewhat awkward. She was already numb to it. Chapter 80. I'm finally in the Roland Empire. I'm finally free. Ron suppressed the joy in his heart and almost couldn't help but shout out loud. He stood in front of the west gate of the Roland Empire's border city, greedily breathing in the free air. Ever since entering the Roland Empire, Ron felt unprecedentedly relaxed. Here, he could do whatever he wanted without anyone interfering. Even when he summoned the skeleton warriors, people only looked at him in surprise. No one came forward to criticize him, and there were no bounty posters posted on the street. The atmosphere of freedom here made Ron's heart relax. Search for the latest update here. Congratulations, Ron. You've finally safely escaped from the Holy See's sphere of influence. You don't have to be afraid of being hunted down anymore. In the Roland Empire, you don't have to hide anymore. From now on, you can stand tall and walk the path of the strong step by step, Homelin said with a smile. I will. Ron's eyes flashed with confidence. I will work harder. After entering the Roland Empire, it was natural to enjoy the flavor and scenery of the Roland Empire. Wu-Tan City was roughly equivalent to a medium-sized city in the Holy Roman Empire. Unlike the Holy Roman Empire, the atmosphere of commerce here was much stronger. Everyone's face was filled with happy smiles, and there was an endless stream of merchants and carriages coming and going. Unlike the Holy Roman Empire, there was no solemn holy cathedral here. Instead, there were mage towers that rose from the ground. Here, magicians that were rarely seen could be found everywhere. They wore the unique robes of the Roland Empire with the symbol of the Magic Union on them. They held magic staffs in their hands and talked about all kinds of magic. Ron looked left and right. It was an eye-opener for him. He saw 2 people standing on the street and loudly preaching magic concept. Those who disagreed with them argued with them. The 2 sides argued on the street, causing many passers-by to stop and watch and listen patiently. Ron was also intoxicated. Homelin said, Ron, a lot of what they're talking about are elementary magic theories, and many of them are wrong. I think you'd better not listen to them. Ron reluctantly looked away and replied, Nothing, I just feel that the atmosphere here is too good. Indeed, Homelin also praised. Compared to the Holy Roman Empire, this place is much freer. As Homelin spoke, he turned his head slightly. Suddenly, his expression froze. After a while, his body began to tremble. Grandpa Homelin, what's wrong with you? Ron felt that something was wrong and hurriedly asked. Homelin didn't say anything. His trembling finger pointed at a place not far away. His face was filled with anger and sorrow. What? Why are you making such a fuss over nothing? Ron turned his head casually. In an instant, his eyes widened. What did he see? He saw necromancers. That's right, necromancers. Before this, Ron had always heard people say where necromancers were the most abundant. The answer was undoubtedly the Roland Empire. Now, Ron and Homelin finally saw the so-called necromancers with their own eyes. But the reality was something they couldn't accept. What kind of necromancers were those? Their clothes were tattered, and they were holding something that looked like a bone in their hand. Their expressions were wooden. If one didn't look carefully, one would believe that they were corpses. Those people were controlling many skeletons. Those skeletons were struggling to carry a big box. Their movements were extremely slow, and their two black eye sockets didn't emit a trace of soul power. These skeletons didn't even have weapons in their hands. They were lifeless like machines. The necromancers controlling them were obviously like coolies. They were exposed to the sun and rain in exchange for 3 meals. These necromancers were considered lucky. In the corner on the other side, a large group of necromancers were sitting or lying down, waiting for a suitable job. When they looked at the necromancers carrying the box, their eyes were filled with envy. At the same time, they anxiously looked around, hoping that a kind employer would take a fancy to them and hire them. At this time, on the other side of Ron, a necromancer sitting down attracted their attention. It was a very ordinary young man. He was sitting on the ground, holding all kinds of cards in his hands. In front of him, there was a lion-shaped skeleton. This lion had 2 bone wings on its back and a huge protrusion on its tail. If Homelin wasn't wrong, that was the skeleton of a poison scorpion lion. On the back of the poison scorpion lion skeleton sat a little boy about 10 years old. The little boy innocently grabbed the 2 bone spurs on the back of the poison scorpion lion, his face full of smiles. Homelin noticed that the so-called skeleton of the poison scorpion lion was just a skeleton. There wasn't a trace of soul power in that skeleton. It couldn't even compare to the skeleton warriors that Ron had summoned for the first time. The poison scorpion lion walked unhurriedly. Every step it took shook a few times, as if it would fall apart at any time. The little boy rode on the poison scorpion lion's back happily, playing a riding game. The young necromancer beside him was sweating profusely. It looked like he was using a lot of energy to support the poison scorpion lion's movements. Not far behind the poison scorpion lion, a young noble couple was pointing and talking about pornographic novels. They looked at the little boy with a loving expression. "My dear, look at how cool our son is riding on the poison scorpion lion. It looks like he has the potential to become a poison scorpion lion knight." The woman leaned her head lightly on the man's shoulder and said gently. The man laughed and said, "Of course, don't you know whose fine breed this is?" The woman laughed and hit him. "Dream on, would you have been able to give birth to this child without me?" The man was giggling foolishly. "Time's up," the young man controlling the poisoned scorpion lion said in a hoarse voice. At this moment, the poisoned scorpion lion stopped and turned into a puff of smoke, disappearing on the spot. "So fast?" The man walked up to the necromancer and asked. 3 silver coins each time, 10 minutes each time. "Time's up." The young necromancer wiped the sweat off his face and answered. Ma, I still want to play. I still want to play." At this moment, the little boy who had been playing happily grabbed the young woman's thigh and begged. The woman was helpless. She patted her son's head. "All right, play. Let's continue playing." She then turned to her husband. "My dear, look." The man nodded. "Then let's play one more time." As he spoke, he looked at the necromancer on the ground and picked up a card. "This one. Dragon Knight. Haha, how cool." The young necromancer nodded and chanted an incantation. Not long after, a black fog rose from the ground. Homelin frowned. No, he chanted the incantation wrong. Also, he doesn't seem to have cultivated spiritual energy. Not long after, a flying dragon-like thing appeared in front of them. This flying dragon-like skeleton was about 2 meters long and half a meter tall. It looked just like a real flying dragon. It flapped its wings, swung its tail, and shook its head, causing the surrounding people to burst into laughter. Dragon Knight! Dragon Knight! The little boy quickly ran to the flying dragon-like skeleton and climbed up. At this moment, the flying dragon-like skeleton began to move. It continuously spread its wings and made a caw-caw sound as it flapped its wings. A few poor people's children stood around and looked at the little boy riding the flying dragon-like skeleton with envy in their eyes. Although they could only play for a while, 3 silver coins wasn't something anyone could afford. Haha, look. Our son might even become a dragon knight. Look at how professional he is playing. He looks just like a real dragon knight when he rides it. The young noblewoman clapped her hands and said. The man also responded with a smile. That's good. When he grows up, I'll send him to the Soaring Dragon Academy. He'll ride a real dragon and become a real dragon knight. AI. Ron sighed and shook his head. He knew that this kind of skeleton couldn't fight. He turned his head and saw that Homelin's grandfather was already in tears. Ron was shocked. Grandpa Homelin, what happened to you? Nothing. Homelin suddenly realized that he had lost control of himself. He took a deep breath and wiped away the tears on his cheek. It's just a feeling in my heart. Thinking of the Scourge Church 100,000 years ago, necromancers were so noble. But now they have fallen to this point. Homelin smiled sadly. Before I saw it with my own eyes, I never thought that this pile of useless skeletons, without any power, even inferior to an ordinary person, would be summoned by a necromancer. Haha, very good. This is a necromancer. Damn, it's really ironic. Homelin took a deep breath. I remember now. When those people heard about necromancers, they looked at you with disdain. Because of this, they looked down on you many times. Seeing all of this, I think I've found the answer. He sighed again. I was mentally prepared for the decline of necromancy, but I didn't think that necromancy would decline to this point. Look at these skeletons. If the ancestors of the Scourge Church saw all of this, I'm afraid they'd be so angry that they'd come back to life. Ron was downcast. After a while, he said, Grandpa Homelin, everything will get better. How about this? I'll teach them true necromancy magic. This way, necromancy magic will flourish, and our necromancers won't have to live so miserably. Homelin thought for a while, but still shook his head. No, now's not the time to teach them necromancy magic. Ron asked in shock, why? Homelin replied, necromancy magic has declined to this point. If you teach them necromancy magic now, it's the same as starting a sect. Without great power, it's impossible. In addition, the rise of the Scourge Church and the strong return of necromancy magic will definitely stir some people's nerve. When the time comes, you'll face many difficulties and dangers. Only your own great power will be the guarantee for your rise. Without that, it's just empty talk. Ron understood and nodded. Grandpa Homelin, what do you think I should do now? Homelin muttered to himself for a while, then said, on the road of cultivation, you don't need anyone to teach you anything. As long as I know it, I can teach you anything. And to become strong, you don't just need cultivation, you also need a lot of knowledge. You need to understand this world, you need to grasp magic, do-chi, and other related situations, strengths, weaknesses, and so on. Furthermore, the knowledge I have from 100,000 years ago can no longer keep up with this era. You may need to go to a specialized academy to systematically study. Ron nodded. I understand. Homelin sighed, then said solemnly, Ron, I hope you can promise me one thing, at least when you have the ability. Grandpa Homelin, speak. Chapter 81. As soon as Ron stepped into Balarax, he was attracted by the atmosphere of the city. The spring enrollment was the highlight of the year, and it was currently in full swing. Balarax was filled with luxurious carriages. Countless nobles and commoners were sending their children to the 3 great academies of the Roland Empire. There was a long queue in front of each academy's entrance. Search for the latest updates. It's so lively. I've never seen such a scene before. Homelin sighed. Were there no academies 100,000 years ago? How did those powerhouses covet them? Ron asked. Homelin shook his head. At that time, the major powers selected geniuses from all over the country and trained them. It's different now. Along the way, Ron saw a dazzling lineup of advertisements for the three great academies. In order to compete for students, there was a fierce competition. The Balarax Academy has enjoyed 1,000 years of fame. It's your best choice. Do you want to become a dragon knight? Do you want to ride a dragon and soar into the sky? Then come to the Soaring Dragon Academy. This is the cradle of dragon knights. This is where your dreams begin. Sir, here you go. Just as Ron was feasting his eyes, a sweet-looking girl wearing a short skirt and long boots handed him a piece of paper. Ron took a look and saw that it was an advertisement for the Roland Empire's Hans Academy. It showed that the Hans Academy's tuition had been greatly reduced, and it only cost a few hundred gold coins a year. Homelin took a look. That's too cheap. This is cheap. Ron shook his head. I don't have that much money. It's expensive. Homelin exclaimed. In the past, learning necromancy magic would cost a few hundred gold coins. But now, it's only a few hundred gold coins a year. It's a pity I don't have money. Ron could only look at the paper in his hand and shake his head. A few hundred gold coins was not expensive, but he had spent almost all of his money. Ron looked at it for a while and reluctantly threw the paper in his hand away. At this time, his attention was attracted by a commotion on the other side. Beginner Magic Apprentice, 8th stage. 15 years old, Intermediate Apprentice Swordsman, 5th Dan. 14 years old. Ron took a closer look. Turned out that there was a talent test for magic power and chi value. Generally speaking, the younger the age, the higher the strength, and the better the talent. Hello, would you like to take a magic test? A girl with the same long hair walked over with a smile. Please allow me to introduce myself. I work in the admissions office of the Soaring Dragon Academy. I'm in charge of receiving new students. If new students can pass the test and achieve good results, our Soaring Dragon Academy can waive your tuition fee. Tuition fee reduction? How much is the reduction? Ron's interest was piqued. 50% reduction for senior apprentices. Pornographic novels. 70% discount for magic apprentices. Normal price for magic apprentices. The girl replied with a smile. Of course, our Soaring Dragon Academy's discount is only for magicians. Other professions don't have this kind of discount. While speaking, she sized up Ron with a glance. Little brother, looking at your thin and weak appearance, you can't possibly be a warrior or knight, right? If you're a mage, you can give it a try. Ah? Only magicians have a discount. Ron's face turned bitter. Unfortunately, I'm not a magician. If you're not a magician, then you must be a thief or an archer. How about this? I'll go inside and talk to the instructor to see if there's a discount or something. The girl thought for a moment and replied. I'm also not a thief or an archer. Ron anxiously replied. Then what are you? The girl was surprised. You can't be a druid, right? That's a profession that only elves have. Could it be that you're an elf? I'm also not an elf. Ron said, I'm a necromancer. Do you have any necromancer profession here? Necromancer. The girl was startled. Her smile immediately disappeared, revealing a disgusted expression. Go, go, go. How can a necromancer be qualified to come to such a sacred and noble place like the Academy? If you want to learn necromancer, only the oldest Balarax Academy has it. How can our Soaring Dragon Academy have such a profession? After saying this, she ignored Ron and turned around to leave. Balarax Academy? Ron inwardly muttered. At this time, Homelin spoke. Ron, then go to the Balarax Academy and take a look. Maybe you can find out some secrets about necromancer. The words Balarax Academy entered Ron's eyes. Like the other two academies, the Balarax Academy, as the oldest one, was also very popular. The registration area for the magician class was already filled with people. A long line extended to the street. Magician, knight, swordsman, thief. Ron looked around one by one, but unexpectedly didn't find the necromancer profession. Ron couldn't help but scratch his head. Didn't they say that the oldest Balarax Academy opened the necromancer profession? Why isn't there a registration area? Ask someone. Homelin thought for a moment and said, "Hello, may I ask where the necromancer profession's registration area is?" Ron stopped a Balarax staff member and asked, "Necromancer?" The staff member was stunned. He looked up and down at Ron, a disgusted expression appearing in his eyes. "I don't know." After saying this, he ignored Ron and turned around to leave. Ron didn't give up and followed up with a few more questions. They all had the same disdain and disgust on their faces. These people are really too much. They clearly know why they don't answer. Ron angrily sat on the side and sulked. On the contrary, Homelin comforted him. "It's okay, we'll ask again." Ever since Homelin saw the current situation of necromancers, he had come to terms with it. Given the strength of necromancers, it was inevitable that they would be looked down upon. In this world where strength was respected, it wasn't strange at all. Homelin looked up slightly. At this moment, something flashed past the corner of his eye. It was a flag with a black skull symbol. His heart skipped a beat. "Ron, quickly go and ask if that's the necromancer profession?" Ron looked up and smiled. "It should be. I'll go and ask now." Vivian lay listlessly on the table, her long black hair hanging down and covering her beautiful face. Putting aside her strength, Vivian was also a beauty. However, because she was a necromancer, all the students and instructors kept a respectful distance from her. In their eyes, necromancers were like evil witches, a combination of inauspiciousness and filth. If she wasn't an instructor, someone would have already taught her a lesson. It had been 3 days and no one had asked about the necromancy major. When she hung up the skull flag, no one was even interested in looking at it. AI. Registration ends tomorrow. It's the last year of the necromancy major. Don't even talk about registering, no one even asked. Vivian thought in distress. These days, she had thought of all sorts of ways to recruit students. She tried to take the initiative, but when the other party heard that it was the necromancy major, their heads shook like a rattle drum. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't convince a single person. AI, forget it. The necromancy major is going to be abolished next year anyway. Why should I lead the students astray? Vivian thought self-deprecatingly. She slowly stood up and prepared to pack up and leave. Everywhere else was filled with students and staff, but in the necromancy major, Vivian was the only one busying herself. "Excuse me." Just as Vivian was packing up, a crisp voice asked. Vivian looked up and sized up the person. The person was about 15 years old, and had a pair of big, lively eyes. He had the most unlikable black hair in the continent of Noah that covered his forehead. His eyes were also black and were spinning around. Vivian quickly lowered her head and continued to pack up her things. She didn't even raise her head as she said, "Are you registering for the magic major? Just walk straight and turn left." Vivian thought that Ron was asking for directions. After all, the Balarax Academy was very big. It was normal to get lost. The voice was obviously stunned. "I'm not here to register for the mage major? Then you're in the swordsman major? Go straight and turn right. That's where the swordsman registration is. But seeing how skinny and weak you are, I'm afraid you won't pass the instructor." Vivian quickly packed up her things and looked up, revealing a smile to him. "I'm also not here to register for the swordsman major." Ron mustered up his courage and said, "I'm here to register for the necromancy major." The necromancy major is in," Vivian said. Suddenly, her eyes widened. What? You want to register for the necromancy major? She turned her head, surprised and happy. Her body even trembled with excitement. After 3 years, the necromancy major finally had a student. To think that such a scene would occur in the last year. Oh my God! Are you playing with me? Wait, I have to confirm. That kid isn't playing with me, right? Vivian thought to herself. She cleared her throat and asked, Are you sure you want to register for the necromancy major? Ron was also shocked by Vivian's big reaction. After a while, he stammered, Yes, I really want to learn necromancy magic. Looks like it's true. Vivian knew that this person wasn't playing with her. She secretly let out a sigh of relief. Looking at the last student of the necromancy major, her expression was a bit complicated. Ron felt strange and asked, This, big sister, is there a problem? How much does it cost to register? I don't care so much. Since he came to register, I'll accept him. At least I have a student. Vivian thought to herself. After 3 years, she finally had a taste of being an instructor. My name is Vivian. You can just call me Instructor Vivian. As for the tuition, 20 gold coins. Vivian was afraid that Ron would run away. Originally, the registration fee was 60 gold coins, but seeing his tattered appearance, she gritted her teeth and reduced it to a third. She would pay the remaining 2/3 out of her own pocket. She even planned to pay all the money even if the other party didn't pay a single coin. Phew, that's good. It's only 20 gold coins. Any more and I won't be able to afford it. Ron secretly let out a sigh of relief. He only had 30 or so gold coins on him. He took out 20 gold coins from the space bag and placed them on the table. Here you go. Space bag, this guy is actually a nouveau riche? Seeing the space bag at Ron's waist, Vivian's heart skipped a beat. Having a space bag at least meant that his family background wasn't bad. But why would such a person come to learn necromancy magic? Could he be another victim of a third-rate novel? Vivian calmly put away the money and put on an act. The tuition fee is enough. Come and fill in the form. Right, what's your name? Chapter 82. Follow me, Vivian said straightforwardly after Ron handed over the money. Ron followed Vivian through the school gates and arrived at a spacious courtyard. Looking around, he saw diligent students everywhere. Many of them were reading books as they walked. On the grass, some magic major students were demonstrating magic. Not far from him, an archer was struggling to maintain an archery posture. Judging from his appearance, which was dripping with cold sweat, it was unknown how long he'd been practicing. Search for the latest updates here. This is amazing. This is the real campus. Ron's heart was filled with excitement. He'd come to this place countless times in his dreams, fantasizing that he would one day set foot on this campus. It would be best if he could do so as a mage. Now, his dream had finally come true, but it was a little different from his dreams. He'd stepped onto this campus as a necromancer. However, what made Ron feel strange was that when the students passed by Vivian, not only did they not show any respect for their teacher, but they instead showed disdain for their teacher. What was even stranger was that Vivian seemed to be used to it, and didn't even crease her brows. Vivian chatted cheerfully and wittily with Ron as she walked, as if there was no one else present. It was obvious that she was in a very good mood. Ron, from now on, I'm your teacher, and you're also the first batch of new students in the necromancy major. When you see a male senior, call him senior, and a female senior. Do you understand? I understand. Ron smiled and nodded. He was starting to like this teacher who was only a few years older than him. He felt that she was like the big sister next door, approachable and amiable. At this time, a dignified voice traveled to Ron's ears. Vivian, your enrollment is over so soon? Who's behind you? Ron turned his head and saw a wretched old man with a grizzled beard walking towards him. Behind him was a fair-skinned youth. He wore a white magic robe and appeared to be in high spirit. His face seemed to be smiling, but it also didn't seem to be. It gave off a very fake feeling. "It's Dean Dabbs." Vivian hurriedly bowed and said with a somewhat nervous expression, "My enrollment is over. He's a freshman in the necromancy major. His name is Ron." Debussy was only the vice principal, but the principal was always elusive. He had been in charge of everything in the academy for a long time. Over time, the students and teachers had gotten used to calling him the principal. Debu was shocked. "What? Necromancy major? Since when did the necromancy major recruit new students?" "Vivian, you didn't just randomly pick someone to make up the numbers, right?" Vivian's face flushed red. She was a little embarrassed as she stammered, No. When I was about to go back, he suddenly came to sign up." "I see." Debussy looked at Ron from head to toe and nodded. "Ron, hurry up and bow to Dean Dabbs," Vivian said. Ron bowed solemnly and said, "Nice to meet you, Dean." "Not bad." Debussy looked at Ron with a satisfied expression in his eyes. However, he then looked meaningfully at Vivian and said, "Teach him well." "Yes, Dean," Vivian said in fear and trepidation. At this time, the fair-skinned man at the side butted in and said with a fake smile, "Hee, Vivian, congratulations. It's been 3 years and you've finally recruited a student. This is a good thing. When will us instructors go out for a few drinks and celebrate?" Vivian's face turned ghastly white. This guy was congratulating her on the surface, but in reality, he was humiliating her in front of everyone. She was already used to this, but now he was humiliating her in front of her student. "Sifri, how can you speak like that? How could Debu not hear the personal attacks in those words?" His expression turned unpleasant. As the vice principal, he had to be impartial. Although that student was dispensable, there were some words that couldn't be said in public. Sifri acted as if he didn't hear anything. "Vivian, you have to teach your student well. You should know that the necromancy major only has a year left. I think you know that the necromancy major will be cancelled next year. Time is tight. If you don't teach well in the last year, Dean Dabbs will be very angry." Debussy frowned. "Sifri, enough. There are students here." Sifri smiled and moved to the side as if nothing had happened. He didn't reply. He had finished what he wanted to say. Vivian was already trembling with anger. He had achieved his goal. Debussy sighed. "Vivian, as instructors, even if we only have one student, we have to teach seriously. This is the responsibility of instructors. Although the necromancy major is weaker than the other majors, this situation can't be said to be your fault. Don't think too much about it. Just do your best to teach your student well." "Yes, Dean Debussy." Vivian bit her lips and lowered her head. Debussy gently stroked Ron's head. "Since you're here, learn well. Understand?" Ron nodded. When he looked at Sifri, his eyes were already filled with anger. Sifri pretended not to see it. The narrow-minded him was already laughing sinisterly in his heart. "You little brat who doesn't know what's good for you. I gave you a kind reminder, but you treat me with such an attitude? One day, you'll know my prowess." Sifri was an adept archmage, only a step away from the realm of Grand Magus. He was powerful and had an extremely high status in the school. Add to that his sunny and handsome appearance, who knew how many ignorant young girls had thrown themselves at him. Over the years, he had been involved in many romantic affairs. In the end, it was the family behind him that settled everything for him. Vivian walked in front, not saying a word. Her black hair hung down loosely, covering her face and making it hard for others to see her expression. Ron followed closely behind her. After a while, Vivian suddenly stopped. Ron also stopped and asked with concern, "Instructor Vivian, what's wrong?" Vivian sighed and said slowly, "That instructor Sifri had tried to woo me several times, but I know that he's a famous playboy in the school. Who knows how many female students have been charmed by him and have climbed into his bed, so I rejected him." Vivian seemed to be talking to herself as she slowly turned her head. Ron saw that her face revealed a sorrowful expression. He flew into a rage out of humiliation and harbored a grudge against me. That's why he said those words just now. Ron suddenly understood and nodded. Instructor Vivian, I understand. I won't be affected by his words, Vivian smiled sadly. Although he said a lot of nonsense, he was right about one thing. Next year, the school has already decided to abolish the necromancy major. Ron cried out involuntarily. How could this be? Vivian shook her head and said self-deprecatingly, I've been an instructor for 3 years, and you're the only student I've recruited this year. It's understandable that the school is disappointed. In other words, Ron, you only have 1 year to study at the Balavax Academy. 1 year to read pornographic novels. I don't think you'll be able to learn anything. How about this? Ron, I'll give you a choice. If you're willing to withdraw, I can refund your tuition fees. Vivian finished speaking and quietly looked at Ron, waiting to see what he would choose. She'd already given up anyway. If Ron voluntarily withdrew after a few months, she'd lose even more face. Ron lowered his head and thought to himself, Grandpa Homelin can teach me necromancy magic. As for other knowledge, I should be able to learn it in a year's time. He raised his head and looked seriously at Vivian. Instructor Vivian, I choose to stay. A trace of surprise appeared on Vivian's face. Really? Ron, you're still deciding to stay? Even if it's only for 1 year? Of course. Ron smiled and reached out to wipe his nose. Apart from you, where else can I learn necromancy magic in the whole continent? But necromancy magic isn't that powerful compared to other elements. Vivian nervously rubbed her hands and said, Ron, you really won't regret it. I won't regret it. Really? Really? Then let's pinky swear. I'll keep my word. 100 years, no changing it. Vivian revealed a rare immature side. She was young, only 23 years old, and would occasionally reveal a childish expression. Pinky swear, 100 years, no changing it. Ron also stretched out his finger and shook hers. All right. Vivian smiled and took out a completed form. You can go back to the dormitory first. Take this form and the dormitory administrator will arrange a place for you according to your age and occupation. Ron took the form in Vivian's hands and scratched his head. His basic information was written on the form, such as name, gender, age, and occupation. It was also stamped with a bright red seal. I'm leaving. If there's anything, find me at the instructor's dormitory, Vivian said and turned to leave. Ron took the form and walked to the place Vivian pointed to. I'm back. Vivian returned to the instructor's dormitory. This was the residence that the Balarax Academy arranged for the instructors of their occupations. However, Vivian's place was relatively simple and crude compared to other instructors. My Vivian is back. An old man with white hair came out to greet her, holding a soup bowl in his hand that was emitting traces of steam. He looked like Vivian's grandfather, but he was actually her father. Vivian's father, Jared, was also a necromancer who had been researching necromancy for decades. He was one of the people who believed in the existence of ancient necromancy. Influenced by her father, Vivian also embarked on the path of necromancy. When her father retired due to health reasons, she took the position of instructor of necromancy. Vivian, how was the enrollment today? Jared asked with a smile. Just as he opened his mouth, he realized that he had asked a stupid question. He couldn't help but slap his own mouth. What was there to be happy about? The necromancy major couldn't recruit anyone at all. Looking at Vivian, Jared felt a little regretful. This child had a strong interest in necromancy since she was young. The father and daughter almost quarreled because of this. Jared thought that if he had persisted a little longer, Vivian might have changed her mind. Even becoming a thief was better than being a useless necromancer. It was very smooth. Vivian's face revealed a rare smile. Father, let me tell you a piece of good news. I recruited a student today. Chapter 83. The dormitory of the Barlowax Academy was an ancient building. It was simple but elegant, and the rotten wooden stakes on the edges showed that it had been there for some time. Ron walked to the door of the dormitory management office and knocked. Search for the latest updates here. Come in. A voice came from behind the door. Ron walked in. The furnishings of the office were simple. There was a carved desk, and an old woman with white hair and a thin face was sitting there writing something. When she saw Ron come in, she didn't raise her head and said, "What do you want?" "Hello, my name is Ron. I'm a new student. May I know which dormitory I'll be staying in?" Ron replied, carefully handing over the form. "Oh, a new student." The old woman raised her head and her tone softened. Ron then noticed that she was wearing glasses. The old woman took the form from Ron and looked at it for a while. Then she frowned. "Necromancer?" Yes," Ron replied. The old woman rubbed her hands. "This isn't good." "What's wrong?" Ron asked nervously, afraid that the other party would refuse. "Nothing. Our academy hasn't had a necromancer study here for a long time. Now that one has suddenly appeared, it's hard to arrange." The old woman rubbed her eyebrows as she looked at the form. She raised her head. "Ron, our dormitories are divided according to the profession of a standard combat team. A dormitory has 8 people, and men and women each have a single room. They are mainly divided into defensive, offensive, control, and logistical professions. For example, defensive professions are knights, offensive professions are swordsmen, thieves, and magicians, and logistical professions are priests. You're a necromancer. To be honest, I don't know which profession to put you in." Ron was stunned. He didn't think that it would be so troublesome to arrange a dormitory, and there were so many requirements for the profession. "Grandpa Homelin, where should I be categorized as a necromancer?" Ron had no choice but to ask Homelin for advice. Homelin scratched his head. "I don't know. In our era, there was no such classification, but according to their classification, it seems that they exist to hunt exotic beasts. So, necromancers should be categorized as magicians, right?" Ron thought for a moment, then said to the old woman, Well, any kind is fine. I just want a place to stay." The old woman thought for a moment. "Since you don't have any requirements, go to room 302. The people there shouldn't reject you too much." A dormitory was actually a standard configuration for a combat squad. If a combat squad member was dissatisfied, they could suggest a replacement and ask the unsuitable member to leave the dormitory. In order to preserve the combat squad's strength, the dormitory administrator would usually consider carefully. That was how room 302 came to be. It was a place known as the garbage shelter, and the people who lived there were the types of people who weren't welcome in the various dormitories. Ron naturally didn't know about these things. He had never had any requirements when it came to living conditions, so he readily agreed. "Alright, room 302 it is. It doesn't matter if the living conditions are a little worse. You've lost. You've lost. Fatty, pay up." In the noisy room 302, a woman was shouting exaggeratedly. She had a head of fiery red curly hair, and her long hair hung loosely over her adorable face. Her slender, jade-like hand was twisting a fatty's ear. The fatty was in so much pain that his teeth were clenched and his mouth was cracked open. There were a total of 4 people in room 302, 2 men and 2 women. They were sitting at a small desk, playing a game called Winner is King. This was a popular tabletop poker game on the Noah continent. Many people could play, but there could only be one winner in the end. There were a dozen or so gold coins on the table, and a pile of silver coins scattered around. Needless to say, these guys were gambling. Room 302 was a 3-room dormitory. The dormitory was divided into male and female rooms, each with a bathroom and bathroom. In the middle was a small hall for public use. The entire dormitory was about 80 square meters, and a total of 8 people made up room 302. Nowadays, mixed dormitories were popular across the continent. It was said that a long time ago, male and female dormitories were separated. Later on, they became combat squads. 8 people formed a combat squad, regardless of gender. Mixed dormitories helped to foster tacit understanding in combat. Of course, it also facilitated communication between male and female students. It was very common for students in the same dormitory to become lovers. Just as the group of people were happily gambling, the door in the room opened with a creak. A woman walked out of the door. Her beautiful eyes were frosty, and she looked extremely unfriendly. So noisy. School has only started a few days ago, and you guys are already gambling here every day. Can't you guys stop for a while? After being scolded by the woman, the few of them lowered their heads, not daring to reply. Only the fatty chuckled and said, "Aurora, school has only started a few days ago, and classes haven't started yet. It's no big deal for us bros to play cards, but when classes start in a few days, we won't be able to play anymore even if we want to." The girl called Aurora snorted coldly. "I say, you guys only think about playing and playing all day long. Don't you ever think about improving your strength? It's because of you guys that we're dragging me down that our room 302 is called a camp for losers." The few of them were red in the face from the scolding. The red-haired girl lowered her head, her face red. It was for no other reason than the fact that among these people, that girl called Aurora was the strongest. No one in room 302 dared to refute her. Only the fatty was unconcerned. What camp for losers? They can call us whatever they want. It's not like we can control what other people say, right? Anyway, I didn't come to this lousy school to improve my strength. Otherwise, why would I have chosen such a coquettish thief? Haha. Although Aurora was fierce, there was nothing she could do about this fatty who did not seek to improve himself. She said exasperatedly, "You guys can do whatever you want, just don't disturb my rest." At this moment Aurora frowned and her ears twitched. "Sounds like someone's coming." "Someone's coming? Could it be that Missy has returned?" the red-haired girl exclaimed in surprise. The Missy she was referring to was also a roommate of room 302, but she had been away for a long time. A good 8-man combat team had been reduced to 7, indicating that they were not strong enough. It was not without reason that they were called a camp for losers. "It's not her. It's someone else." At the mention of the Missy, Aurora's eyes flashed with disgust. Then who could it be? Could it be a new student? The red-haired girl asked. The fatty, on the other hand, was delighted. "It could be a pretty chick." "In your dreams." The red-haired girl could not help but roll her eyes at him. At this moment, the fatty suddenly jumped up. "Quick, quick. Place your bets, open the bet, 5 gold coins. Quick. I bet it's a girl." Before the others could say anything, Aurora snorted coldly. "Bet, bet, bet. All you think about is gambling. Let me tell you, you're going to lose. 305, 304, 303, 302. It's here." Ron looked at the door plate, held the key the old woman had given him, and reached out to open the door to room 302. As soon as Ron stepped through the door, he was stunned to see 5 surprised gazes directed at him. You. Hello." Ron stuttered as he greeted them. "Oh my God!" The fatty, seeing Ron, immediately howled, "I lost 20 gold coins in one go. Hee, pay up, pay up." When the others saw this, they immediately beamed with joy. Only Aurora stood still. Ron, seeing this, was also stunned. What's going on?" A red-haired girl stood up and said, "Hee, we were just betting whether the person who came in was a man or a woman. Hee, thanks to you, we won the fatty's money." Ron heard this and sweated profusely. How could this be bet? The fatty, with a bitter face, walked to Ron's side, reached out and patted his shoulder. "Brother, Why aren't you a woman? You made me lose 20 gold coins. As he said this, he began to complain with tears and snot. Ron said, I'm really sorry about this. How about I pay for it? He remembered that he still had a few dozen gold coins and hurriedly said this. The fatty, hearing this, perked up. Brother, are you serious? Don't listen to him, the red-haired girl said with a smile. This guy has a lot of money, he's just pretending. The fatty, hearing this, got up unwillingly. Manny, why do you always expose me? As he said this, he also laughed and patted Ron's shoulder. Brother, I'm sorry, I was just joking with you, that's good. Ron secretly sighed in relief. If he took out another 20 gold coins, he really wouldn't have any money left. You're assigned to room 302, right? Oh right, what's your name? The fatty, who was very friendly, patted Ron's shoulder and asked. I'm Ron. Ron replied with a smile. He looked at the people in the dormitory, thinking that these people would be his roommates from now on. He nodded to them one by one, at least they could be considered acquaintances. Hee Ron, nice to meet you, the fatty said with a smile. Come, let me introduce you. First, let's talk about this person. Lantry, he's a knight. Unfortunately, as a knight, he doesn't have a horse. The fatty vividly introduced, so his nickname is No Horse. Lantry's face turned red when he heard this. Who are you calling No Horse? And this is a famous magician of the earth element. Her name is Karachi. The fatty said. Hello, Ron. The pretty girl stood up and saluted with a red face. Ron noticed from the corner of his eye that the girl's pants seemed to be patched. I have to say, this is the fire element swordswoman, Manny. She's a beauty, the fatty said with a smile. Manny gave Ron a coquettish look, stood up, and gently bent over, revealing her deep cleavage. She had a charming smile on her face. Welcome, Ron. Ron's face also flushed red to the tips of his ears. You. Hello. Manny, as for this one. The fatty laughed, and then continued to talk to Aurora. She's the boss of our dormitory, the famous god of archery, Aurora. She's also the strongest in our dormitory. She's young, but she's already obtained the title of advanced archer. As for me, the fatty laughed, the fat on his face trembling a few times. I'm the strongest thief known as the future god of killing. Kid Ron's eyes widened when he heard this. Thief? You? He looked at Kid's body, which was so fat that his muscles couldn't be put down, and was in awe. Chapter 84. Ron. Actually, this fatty has another name. The horseless knight, Lantry, said with a wink. Fatty panicked when he heard that. You're not allowed to say it, Lantry continued. This guy is the seventh in the family. When he first came, we called him seventh brother. Now we call him second fifth brother. Ron was puzzled. Why second fifth brother? 2 + 5 = 7. Lantry clapped his hands and laughed. Karachi covered her mouth and laughed. No, it's because he's a little. Ha ha ha. Everyone laughed when they heard that. Even Aurora, who was always serious, had a smile on her face. Don't laugh. The fatty jumped up and rushed toward Lantry. Everyone laughed even harder. Aurora quickly stopped laughing. She looked at Ron and asked, You're Ron? What's your class? How strong are you? My class? Ron scratched his head. I'm a necromancer. Necromancer? When everyone heard this, they were first shocked, then their faces showed disappointment. Aurora, however, frowned and sighed. It's okay. It's okay. At this time, the fatty and second fifth brother comforted Ron. Isn't it just a necromancer? Now our trash concentration camp is even more deserving of its name. Ron was shocked. Trash camp? What's going on here? After Kid's explanation, Ron finally understood the origin of Trash Concentration Middle School. Kid was a fat bandit. He had been in the academy for 3 years, but he was only an apprentice intermediate bandit. If it weren't for his family's wealth, the academy would have kicked him out long ago. The horseless knight, Lantry, and Karachi were a pair of siblings. They came from a commoner family, but they chose the most expensive class. One was a knight and the other was a magician. Lantry could not afford a horse, and even if he did, he could not afford to raise one. A knight with a mount could increase his strength by 30%, but without a mount, he was even weaker than a warrior. Karachi was the same. All the money she had was enough to buy a white staff of the lowest level. Without strength, they became a burden to the other battle groups, so they were sent here. As for Manny, she was sent here because she had offended a certain teacher in the academy. She had never mentioned the specific reason. Aurora, on the other hand, was extremely strong. She was sent here because she had a conflict with a teacher in the academy. She, who was so strong, had seriously injured the teacher. The academy was furious and sent her here. There was also a rich young lady, Lucia, who was rarely seen in the dormitory. Every year, her housekeeper would come to pay her tuition fees on time, but she rarely went to school. Even her roommates rarely saw her. There were a total of 6 people in dormitory 302. Except for Lucia, there were only 5 left. Among them, the fat bandit, second fifth brother, could be ignored. He was a bandit, but he fought like a warrior. In every competition, he was the first to die. Therefore, in addition to the title of the fattest bandit in history, he also had the title of the fastest bandit to die in history. The horseless knight, Lantry, and the poorly equipped mage junior sister, Karachi, had their strength greatly reduced in battle. They almost all relied on Manny and Aurora to hold the line. Manny was a warrior, and her strength was not bad. However, there were only 6 people in dormitory 302. Other than the 4 who couldn't fight, only Manny and Aurora were left. Even if Aurora had the strength of a super genius, she couldn't do anything about it. In the end, she was defeated. Therefore, Aurora attached great importance to Ron's strength. However, when she heard him say that he was a necromancer, she couldn't hide the disappointment on her face. She couldn't help but laugh at herself. If he was a genius, how could he have been sent to dormitory 302? Ron didn't care about this. He came here to learn and broaden his horizons. His goal wasn't to be number 1 in the academy. The academy library was the place he wanted to go the most. They were all young people, so Ron quickly became familiar with them. These people didn't show any obvious hostility towards Ron's arrival. They were all people from the trash camp, so there was no need to talk about each other. Ron learned from the conversation that these people were all repeaters of Balrog's academy. The oldest, Fatty Gid, had been at the academy for 3 years. The youngest had been at the academy for a year. According to him, he came to this academy to study for his father. Just then, the door creaked open and a head popped out. It was a youth about the same age as them. He had short blue hair, wore glasses, and had a cultured look. "Excuse me, is this dormitory 302? The fat man whistled as he said, "Hey, I'm not going anywhere." Another freshman. What day is it today? Did all the freshmen rush here? The youth seemed a little embarrassed. He slowly walked in, his pure white cleric robes extremely dazzling. A cleric. Apart from Ron, everyone's eyes widened. They looked at the shy youth in front of them in disbelief. The Balrog's Academy's dormitory management was too awesome. They actually assigned a cleric to dormitory 302. One had to know this was a rare resource. Could it be that he committed some crime and was kicked out? A huge question mark appeared above the heads of those few. My name is Rum. I'm a cleric. The youth called Rum stuttered. "Ha. Brother, we'll be relying on you to protect us from now on." The fatty quickly ran over and stretched out his hand to press down on the seemingly thin and weak youth. His personality as a friendly person was displayed vividly. Look, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. It turns out that a cleric really came to our dormitory. Aurora's face also floated up with a smile. This is great. Our dormitory strength has risen to a new level. A cleric was the most powerful profession in the support class. One had to know that not every combat group had a cleric. Seeing everyone's somewhat expectant gazes, Rum's face turned even redder. He knew that this dormitory had high expectations for a cleric, but he himself knew that he wasn't a qualified cleric. He didn't know why, but every time he was nervous, Rum's mind would become blank. He couldn't remember any spells. It wasn't a problem usually, but in battle, if he didn't use healing spells in time, it would be extremely fatal. When Rum was nervous, he would drop the ball. Because of this, he was scolded by his roommates. In the end, his roommates couldn't take it anymore and voted to kick him out of the dormitory. He was assigned to dormitory 302. No. But I'm not a freshman, Rum said with a red face. I was originally from dormitory 818, but I was kicked out. As he spoke, he didn't hide anything from everyone. He told them about how his mind would go blank when he was nervous. After telling them about the matter, he finally sighed and said, I don't know why I'm like this. Usually, when I'm practicing, nothing happens. But when it comes to battle, it's like I have amnesia. I can't remember anything. But when the battle is over, my healing spells will be fine. Everyone was speechless. The battle was over. Why would they still need a cleric? Aurora's lips tightened, and the joy on her beautiful face gradually turned to disappointment. She sighed slightly in her heart and said, Now there are 2 more people in dormitory 302. How about this? I think we should sit down and strengthen each other's understanding. Let's see if there's any chance in the future ranking battles. Everyone agreed. The 7 of them sat down at the table in the middle of the small hall. Karachi was very diligent and took the initiative to pour a glass of water for everyone. Aurora sat down with a serious expression. She was the strongest, so she took the initiative to speak. Let me speak first. My name is Aurora. I'm a senior archer. I once hunted a level 6 exotic beast alone. As soon as Aurora's voice fell, everyone exclaimed. They knew how powerful a level 6 exotic beast was. It was indeed not easy for Aurora to hunt a level 6 exotic beast alone. Even those senior students might not be able to do it. It was Manny's turn. She said embarrassedly, Manny, intermediate flaming swordsman. I don't have any decent battle records. Lantry said in a low voice, Lantry, junior knight. Alas. Unfortunately, I don't have a horse. If I had a warhorse, I would be able to display the power of a knight. Karachi blushed and lowered her head, saying softly, Karachi, apprentice senior magician. I don't have any decent battle records. Lantry, intermediate priest. I've participated in a few ranking battles, but I can't be of much use. Alas, I always drop the ball at the crucial moment. Lantry said in annoyance. It was Fatty's turn. He said with a smile, Kid, apprentice junior thief. I've always fought bravely and charged at the front. That battle record. I'm not bragging, but it would take 3 days and 3 nights to finish talking about it. Alright, that's enough. Next. Before Kid could finish, he was interrupted by Aurora. He could only shut his mouth in embarrassment. 6 pairs of eyes looked at Ron in unison. Ron moved his mouth. Just as he was about to speak, Aurora interrupted him again. Alright, Ron, you don't have to say anything. We all know. Aurora sighed. Necromancers have limited use in battle. Ron was about to open his mouth and say the words advanced necromancer when he heard Aurora's words. Aurora gritted her teeth and thought for a while. After a long time, she finally raised her head. With Lantry joining us, I think our strength will increase a little. As long as the priest doesn't drop the ball at the crucial moment. As Aurora thought about it, she spoke out the battle plan in her mind. Me with Manny and Lonsim, if we work together well, I believe that we won't lose too badly. Of course, with just the 3 of us, It's impossible for us to win the championship in the ranking battle, but at least we won't be at the bottom. In the Academy's ranking battle, the winner would be richly rewarded, while the loser would be criticized by the entire Academy. In fact, it was an assessment of the degree of cooperation in battle. This assessment was based on the dormitories. Due to the lack of people in dormitory 302, coupled with the fact that Fatty and the others weren't doing their best, their results had always been at the bottom. The proud and arrogant Aurora was naturally unwilling to accept this, but she couldn't do anything by herself. Aurora gritted her teeth. Her gaze slowly swept across Ron, Karachi, Lantry, and Kid's faces. When the time comes, the few of you will be the first to rush up in battle and disrupt the opponent's formation. I will take the opportunity to launch a sneak attack from behind. This way, we will have a chance to win. Lantry and Karachi nodded inwardly. If they weren't strong enough, there was nothing they could do about being cannon fodder. Only Fatty Kid was laughing heartlessly. No matter what Aurora said, he would be the first to rush out. As for Ron, he didn't express any opinion. Chapter 85. The opening ceremony for new students was held in the small auditorium. Although it was a small auditorium, it could easily accommodate a few thousand people. The opening ceremony for the older students was held in the large auditorium. It was said that the large auditorium could hold tens of thousands of people, but Ron was a new student and had no chance to see it. In room 302, apart from Ron, everyone else had gone to the large auditorium to attend the opening ceremony. Search for the latest updates here. Ron walked down the aisle of the auditorium, breathing in the faint scent of books. On both sides of the aisle stood lifelike statues that were taller than a person. Miso Els Dajafar, Noah 21,849 to 22,107. Ron read the small words below the statue as he walked into the small auditorium. A staff member with a badge on his chest led Ron to a corner and sat down. These staff members were ordinary citizens of Ballarat. Before they were hired by the Academy, they did some odd jobs here, mainly cooking and cleaning. Now they were here to maintain order. Ron looked around and saw that the auditorium was already full of people. As the opening ceremony had not yet begun, many people were standing and shouting in the aisle. The auditorium was very lively. Seeing this scene, Hamelin sighed. It's so lively here. It's good to be young. Looking at them, I feel like I'm dozens of years younger. Hee, if you were here, Grandpa, I'm afraid you'd sit up there. Ron pointed at the rostrum. Hamelin pursed his lips. Rostrum? That's for the weak. I haven't seen a single person from the sacred domain. Master was a strength that Ron looked up to, but Hamelin called them weak. Ron could only shake his head and smile bitterly. Suddenly, his body was touched by someone, followed by a delicate cry. Ouch! The one who bumped into Ron was a very young girl, about 13 or 14 years old. She kept saying, "I'm sorry, I didn't see. It's okay." Ron was also very open-minded, but why did he feel that the voice sounded so familiar? The girl raised her head, her bright eyes flashing with a clear light. Ron was shocked when he saw it. "It's you." The girl in front of him was none other than Godeli, who Ron had fought against before. She was the youngest genius mage in the Salter family. Godeli also recognized Ron, and her eyes showed surprise. Ron took a step back, his eyes full of vigilance. He had killed the Salter family's young master Jordan, who was Godeli's cousin. The hatred between them was irreconcilable. Ron was on guard, while Godeli's expression was rather calm. At this moment, the atmosphere was rather awkward. Godeli did not look like she wanted to make a move. She only gently ran her fingers through her hair, and a bright smile appeared on her face. "Ron, I didn't expect to see you here." Ron was startled. He had no idea what she was up to, and the vigilance in his eyes grew even stronger. Godeli continued, "I don't know anyone here, But now there's finally someone I know." At this moment, the voice of the Academy's staff came, indicating for the students to sit down. The opening ceremony was about to begin. God-Eli smiled. "The opening ceremony is about to begin. Let's talk later." After saying that, she ignored Ron and walked past him. After taking a few steps, she turned around and said, "Ron, your necromancy is very strong." After saying that, she turned around and left. "What's going on? Aren't we enemies? Why does it seem like she doesn't have much hostility towards me?" Ron was at a loss. Looking at the ponytail swinging behind her petite figure, this little girl is really strange. Ron became even more vigilant. He did not know what she was plotting. As soon as Ron sat down, the opening ceremony began. First, several famous teachers of various professions gave speeches, asking everyone to study hard and listen carefully in class. The last one to go on stage was Vice Dean Darbus, whom Ron had met before. He explained the current situation of this world. There were many strong people in each race, and he hoped that everyone could maintain a humble attitude and not be arrogant and complacent. Ron noticed that God-Eli was sitting in front of the special admissions students. What was different from the ordinary freshmen was that there was a large table covered with a red cloth, and there were all kinds of desserts on it. Even the chairs they were sitting on were made of real leather, which was completely different from the hardwood seats of ordinary students. Reaching the level of a beginner at a very young age was considered a special admissions student. God-Eli, who had reached the level of an intermediate mage at the age of 13, was impressively among the special admissions students. At this moment, Ron suddenly felt the difference between ordinary freshmen and special admissions students. He even had an impulse to sit at the special admissions students' table. When the surrounding freshmen looked at the special admissions students' table, their eyes also revealed expressions of envy and jealousy. This was a small technique used by the Academy to stimulate the students' motivation. Through the comparison of their identities, it had a great impact on the students' psychology. Why could they sit there? Why could they enjoy this special privilege? Why? Although these freshmen did not show anything on their faces, there were great waves in their hearts. Hamelin also noticed this change in Ron. He smiled and said, "Ron, there are some things that you don't need to be envious of. What will come will naturally come. As for the path of the strong, what you gain is far greater than what you pay." Ron nodded heavily. "Grandpa Hamelin, I understand." At this time, Dab's speech on the stage also came to an end. "Students, the Balarax Academy is only a starting point on your path to becoming a powerhouse. The height of this starting point will not determine your future achievements. I hope that all of you will go even higher and further on your path to becoming a powerhouse." After Dabs finished speaking, the scene was filled with warm applause. After the opening ceremony, the students dispersed in twos and threes. Ron sat motionless, waiting for these students to leave before standing up and walking towards the door. In the aisle of the corridor, the figure of a young girl stood abruptly. She was wearing a white magic robe with red edges, her long hair was tied into a ponytail. Her body was leaning against the wall, and it looked like she had been waiting for a long time. God-Eli. Ron's pupils shrank, his hand pressing on the space bag, his face showing a guarded expression. God-Eli raised her head, a warm smile on her face, without a trace of hostility. "Ron, you came out with a pornographic novel. I've been waiting for you for a long time. What are you waiting for me for?" Ron's expression was solemn as he said in a deep voice, "If you want to avenge Jordan, there's no such thing." God-Eli shook her head and changed the topic. "Ron, let's not talk about this anymore. Let's walk together?" Ron was silent, but he could only nod in agreement. He also wanted to know what God-Eli was up to. The two walked on the tree-lined path of the Balarax Academy, the spring breeze blowing in their faces making them feel comfortable. God-Eli brushed the hair in front of her forehead and said with a smile, "Ron, I think you must be feeling very strange. You and I are clearly enemies, but I took the initiative to look for you. Ron immediately stopped, his eyes fixed on God Eli. You don't want to avenge Jordan? God Eli laughed. Why would I want to avenge Jordan? Ron looked at her with a puzzled expression. God Eli smiled. Ron, you might not understand, but in a large family like Salter, the so-called family affection is the cheapest thing. As one of the family's successors, Jordan died, so Patriarch Jialai was naturally furious. But in the family, you don't know how many people secretly rejoiced. Ron indeed didn't understand. He didn't grow up in a large family. To those large families, the struggle for the successor was no less than the struggle for the throne in the palace. It was the same scheme, the same cruelty. I'm not the successor, God Eli continued. Although I have a lot of support in the family, I understand that this is only their scheme. Although Patriarch Jialai appreciates me, it doesn't mean that he will support me to become the patriarch. Ron was silent. He didn't know why God Eli would tell him this. Jordan died, am I sad? I don't think so. To be honest, if I didn't owe his mother a favor, I wouldn't have gone to Naka Manor. Although according to seniority I should call him cousin, I don't have much affection for him. It doesn't matter if he's dead or alive. It has nothing to do with me, so why would I want to avenge him? God Eli said with a smile. After she finished speaking, she quietly looked at Ron. Ron was silent for a long time. He took a deep breath and asked, Why are you telling me this? God Eli didn't answer directly. She only smiled. Ron, I can feel that your strength has increased again. To be honest, with your strength, you are most qualified to sit in the front row of the special enrollment seats. Godely continued, I secretly went to Asinaris. Ron's heart suddenly trembled. Asinaris' 1,000-year impregnable fortress was destroyed in a single strike. Ron, I really don't know how you did it. This kind of strength makes my heart cold. Godely's tone was full of envy. However, Ron knew in his heart that that strike was because he had used the divine power of death. It wasn't his own strength. So at that moment, I decided that I would no longer treat you as an enemy. I don't have the ability to interfere with the family. As far as I'm concerned, treating you as an enemy isn't a very good choice. God Eli raised her head, a pair of beautiful eyes carrying a maturity that didn't match her age. Ron, as a member of the family, I'm really sorry that Jordan accidentally killed your grandfather. But that matter is already in the past. I personally hope to be friends with you, not enemies. With that, God Eli stretched out her hand. Ron sighed. He didn't want that matter to turn out like this. Looking at that delicate white jade-like hand under the sunlight, he hesitated whether he should hold it or not. Gradually, a trace of disappointment flashed in Godely's eyes. God Eli, so you're here. I've been looking for you for a long time. At that moment, a voice interrupted the two. A tall, thin, and fair-skinned young man dressed in noble attire quickly walked over and stood beside God Eli. He looked at Ron with intense hostility. Who is he? Before Ron could speak, God Eli interrupted. Senior Tosny, this is Ron. He's also from the Holy Roman Empire. He's an old friend, Ron. This is Tosny, my senior from the same dorm. So that's how it is? The young man called Tosny nodded. He sized up Ron a few times and looked at his commoner attire with a trace of disdain in his eyes. God Eli, let's go back. The dorm has a short meeting to discuss the situation of the Academy ranking tournament. Oh! God Eli nodded and waved at Ron. Ron, goodbye. Looking at the two's departing figures, Ron was unsure and asked Homelin, Grandpa Homelin, what do you think? That girl is a little scheming, but there are many people like that in large families. In my opinion, she shouldn't have any ill intentions towards you. Chapter 86. Ron, Kid, Lantry, and Rum were in the same room. Aurora, Karachi, and Manny were in another room. That night, Ron slept soundly for the first time. Here, there was no wind and frost, no soul-stirring pursuits, and no need to live in fear. The next day, Ron woke up on time and went to the cafeteria to eat breakfast. Then, he walked to the classroom. Today was his first class. Search for the latest updates here. When he arrived at the classroom, he saw that many students had already arrived. However, there were still many empty seats. Ron was surprised to see a familiar face, Goldilocks. She smiled and waved her hand, gesturing for Ron to sit beside her. Ron smiled and shook his head, declining. He wasn't that familiar with Goldilocks yet. Ron glanced at Goldilocks and saw a trace of disappointment on her face. Ron casually found a seat and sat down. Hamelin laughed and said, "Ron, there are many new geniuses here. Apart from Goldilocks, there are even warriors at the age of 15. Some are even at the advanced level, as expected of specially recruited students. Look at that blue-haired girl. She's only 16 years old. She's actually an advanced mage, and a water elemental at that. That boy in white, advanced swordsman. TSK, these people's talent is not simple." Hamelin praised and pointed out the people he pointed out to Ron. Most of the people he pointed out were at the intermediate warrior level, and a few were at the advanced level. Ron's talent in necromancy was indeed very good, but his current strength was all thanks to the soul ring. It was very impressive that other youths of the same age could reach this level. As a student, strength wasn't enough. They also needed to learn all kinds of knowledge. Ron's first class was literature, and his second class was arithmetic. Under the school teacher's seductive and in-depth teaching, Ron listened with great interest. It seemed very simple, but it contained great principles. Hamelin was also very supportive of this knowledge. In his words, as a strong person, in addition to improving their strength, they also needed to learn all kinds of knowledge. Otherwise, they would only become a fool who only knew how to act recklessly. The school's teachers were divided into two types. One was the professional mentor, who guided the students on the path of cultivation. The other was the teacher, who specialized in teaching all kinds of knowledge, such as arithmetic, art, literature, and so on. Teachers were usually commoners. Compared to the mentors, they didn't have much strength and were more scholarly. Compared to their knowledge, the students were far worse. The Balarax Academy was a boarding school, and all students had to live in the academy, even the locals. Once the strict nobles were let loose, many of them began to lose their self-awareness. Especially these teachers who imparted knowledge. They themselves did not have much strength and could not control these students. During the first lesson of the semester, there were already students whispering and eating. Some even openly fell in love in class. This was all thanks to the fact that men and women were in the same dormitory. There were very few students who paid attention in class. In this world, everything is about strength. Teachers without strength, who would place them in their eyes. If it was a different mentor, the situation would be much better. In Ron's eyes, these teachers were very worthy of respect. They were very dedicated, patiently explaining every difficult detail until everyone understood it. They didn't care if anyone was listening or not. The arithmetic class ended very quickly, and there was a 10-minute break between classes. As the bell rang, the students returned to their seats one after another. The next class was history. Ron had just sat down when he saw a familiar figure walk up to the podium. He focused his eyes and saw that it was his mentor, Vivian. Vivian was the necromancy mentor. Since the necromancy major didn't have any students, she didn't live up to her title as a mentor. Thus, she had been holding the position of history teacher. Vivian walked up to the podium and swept her gaze over the classroom. When she saw Ron, she nodded slightly. "Hello everyone, my name is Vivian. I'm your history teacher. It's nice to meet you all." Applause sounded, but it was a little sparse. Ron was very enthusiastic because this was his mentor. Alright, let's turn to the first page of the book. Today's class is Ancient Legends. The lost continent. A long, long time ago, a group of strange humans lived on the Earth. They controlled skeletons and engaged in cruel battles with strange beasts. This period of time is known as the Ancient Era. Ron was surprised. The Ancient Era? Isn't that the era of the Scourge Church? Homelin said in a deep voice, there seems to be a connection. If you listen carefully, you might find the mystery of the disappearance of necromancy magic. Vivian quickly got into character. She vividly described, these people were extremely powerful. They weren't inferior to the elves and beasts of the ancient era. Vivian's saliva flew everywhere as she spoke, but the students below didn't have much interest. They chatted, ate, and fell in love. Only Ron listened very seriously. At this time, a sneer suddenly came from the corner of the classroom, breaking the harmonious atmosphere. He said in a strange tone, Teacher Vivian, do you think it's the necromancer who's called a loser on the continent? The classroom suddenly roared with laughter. The faces of the students were full of gloating. They saw Vivian on the podium wearing a long robe decorated with skeletons. It was obvious that she was a necromancer. As the saying goes, hit someone, don't hit them in the face. The students, who wanted to see the world in chaos, quickly switched to watching mode. The one who spoke was a youth of 16 or 17. He had a head of blue curly hair, fair skin, and an exquisite face. He looked extremely spirited, and a flirtatious smile hung at the corner of his mouth. His name was Highfirth, a noble of the Roland Empire. He was also a genius student of the Balarax Academy this year. He had an older brother who was studying in the advanced class, so he was very familiar with all the rules of the academy. Apart from not being able to provoke a teacher, verbal conflict was acceptable for those teachers who didn't have the strength. He had already asked around and found out that Vivian was a necromancy teacher. She had the least status among the teachers, so he felt at ease provoking her. Vivian's face was somewhat pale. She didn't expect to encounter such a situation on the first day of school. Highfirth continued to provoke. Teacher Vivian, tell me, are necromancers really as powerful as the legends say? Vivian took a deep breath. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened, but she didn't have much experience in dealing with it. There was no other reason than her lack of confidence. The so-called confidence was referring to strength. If you say necromancers are powerful, then let's have a contest. As a teacher, if you can't beat a pornographic novel, then let's have a contest. If you can't beat your own student, then you'll lose face. If you say they aren't powerful, then isn't that slapping your own mouth? She thought for a moment and said, according to the records passed down from ancient times, necromancy was indeed the mainstream of the continent in ancient times. It's just that true necromancy has been lost for a long time now, and what we necromancers have learned is only the tip of the iceberg. Vivian's refutation was reasonable, and even Homelin couldn't help but nod inwardly. The current necromancy really was the tip of the iceberg, or even worse. Heh. Highfirth laughed sinisterly and stood up. There's no evidence of what happened 100,000 years ago. Of course you can say whatever you want, Highfirth laughed. Yesterday, just yesterday, I found dozens of necromancers on the streets of the east side of the city to amuse them. I made them line up, one moment in an S shape, the next moment in a B shape, and finally made them bark like dogs. Guess how much it cost? How much? A few of Highfield's buddies cooperated with him, and started putting on an act. Heh, it didn't even cost 3 gold coins in total. It's really too damn cheap. Ha ha ha. Those buddies laughed loudly, causing many students in the classroom to laugh as well. The atmosphere in the classroom was ruined. Vivian was so angry that her face turned pale. She gritted her teeth, and her eyes reddened for some reason. She felt wronged, and tears kept flowing in her eyes. Don't cry. Don't cry, I have to be strong. This little blow is nothing. Vivian tried her best to comfort herself, but her fluctuating emotions made her body involuntarily tremble. High Firth watched this beautiful female teacher lose face in front of all the students, and his heart was filled with unreasonable pleasure. He didn't intend to let her go, and laughed. Teacher Vivian, I have no intention of questioning your faith, but the great prophet taught us that seeing is believing. Teacher Vivian, please summon a few skeletons to broaden our horizons. Ha ha ha. Okay. Do your best. High Firth, I support you. The students' emotions were ignited, and the atmosphere suddenly rose to the peak. There were gloating laughter everywhere, and only a few quiet female students didn't join in the commotion. Vivian felt isolated like never before. Who told her to have no strength? In the Noah continent, strength was the most important thing. Here, everyone knew that necromancers were trash. She even talked about how powerful necromancers were in class. Many students didn't say anything on the surface, but they already disapproved of it in their hearts. Enough. At this time, a shout was heard, and it was extremely loud in this noisy classroom. Ron's face was tense. His patience had reached its limit. He admitted that necromancy magic was indeed lost, and it was reasonable for people to look down on it. But he couldn't stand it being insulted like this. Yo! Someone stood up? High Firth turned his head indifferently and glanced at Ron. He laughed. I was wondering who it was. So you're also a necromancer. You're also trash. Teacher Vivian, this is your necromancy student, right? You've got guts. High Firth pulled the table in front of him, making a loud noise. He grinned as he rolled up his sleeves, and a faint fiery glow circulated on his arm. He walked closer step by step and sneered, Reckless fellow, let this lord teach you how to write the word death. The reason why High Firth was so angry was because he always thought of himself as the boss of the new students. As a specially recruited student, he indeed had the capital to do so. Ron stood up to provoke him, and naturally he was unhappy. He didn't dare to hit a teacher due to the school rules, but no one dared to say anything about taking care of a student. Intermediate swordsman? Ron's mouth curved up. In just a moment, he had seen through the opponent's strength. A burst of black gas surged out of his hand, and a short bone spear appeared in Ron's hand. He sneered, and without the slightest fear, he faced High Firth head-on. What? All the students in the classroom were stunned. What shocked them wasn't the fight in the classroom, but the fact that the necromancer who everyone thought was trash actually had the courage to face High Firth head-on. Was he looking for death? High Firth's face darkened, and a trace of killing intent flashed through his eyes. Since you're looking for death, I'll reluctantly let you bleed a little. Stop! At this time, a delicate shout came from behind High Firth. He turned his head in surprise and saw that Goldilocks, who was also a specially recruited student, had stood up at some point. She held a fireball in her hand, and the fireball had already taken shape and was dancing in her hand. High Firth's expression suddenly froze. Goldilocks, what are you doing? Chapter 87. Not only were High Firth and the students in the class astonished, even Ron was astonished. He didn't expect that Goldilocks would bravely step forward at such a critical moment. Although Ron didn't need Goldilocks' protection with his strength, Goldilocks was also very clear about this point. Hee, this little girl is expressing her goodwill towards you, Homelin said with a smile. Ron also nodded in agreement, feeling a little touched in his heart. His suspicions and wariness towards Goldilocks had mostly dissipated. High Firth stared blankly for a moment, a trace of jealousy flashing in his eyes. Goldilocks, why? Are you going to make things difficult for me for this trash necromancer? High Firth, who was also from the Holy Roman Empire, had known Goldilocks for a long time. His Caballan family and Goldilocks' Salter family had been friends for generations. High Firth had fallen in love with Goldilocks at first sight a long time ago. His family also had the intention of forming a marriage alliance with her, but Goldilocks had never spoken to him. The corners of Goldilocks' mouth rose slightly, revealing a charming smile as she said, Highforth, I've already said that Ron is my friend. If you dare to touch him, you'll be making things difficult for me. Godely's expression darkened slightly, and the fireball in her hand expanded a little. I'm not joking with you. The classroom was dead silent, and the atmosphere suddenly dropped to the freezing point. Even Vivian on the podium had her mouth wide open. Godely was the youngest in the class, but from her facial features, she was already a living beauty. She came from the famous Salter family of the Holy Roman Empire. Most importantly, she was very powerful. She was already an intermediate mage at the mere age of 13, and was the idol of many of the new students. Not only the freshmen, but even the seniors also regarded her as their wife. In just a few days after school started, she had already received dozens of love letters. Although Godely was only 13 years old, she was extremely mature. She rejected all the love letters, causing the students to be extremely disappointed. Such an outstanding genius would actually stand up for a useless necromancer, and even shed all pretense of cordiality with another specially recruited student. Her relationship with him was worth pondering over. This caused many of the male students in the class to feel jealous. These piercing gazes were naturally directed at Ron. The muscles on Highforth's face twitched fiercely a few times. He really didn't expect Godely to stand out at this time. This made it difficult for him to back down. Godely had cast an intermediate spell, Fireball. She was clearly putting her life on the line. Highforth had no doubt that he would be in serious trouble if the spell came crashing down. He couldn't do anything about Godely, and could only cast a vicious gaze at Ron. Stinking brat, don't hide behind a woman if you have the guts. What's the point of relying on a woman to protect you? Ron smiled. I don't need anyone to protect me, and I've never been afraid of anyone. If you want to fight, I'll accompany you. Exclamations rang out in the classroom. Among them was Mentor Vivian, who was on the podium. Her mouth was opened so wide that she could swallow an egg. Was this guy crazy? A necromancer actually dared to challenge an intermediate swordsman? Or did this guy have no concept of strength in his mind? What kind of people could enter the Ballarak's academy? They were all geniuses with outstanding talent since childhood. As a specially recruited student, Highforth was a genius among geniuses. Could it be that he was treating Highforth as an ordinary child? In the classroom, only Godely didn't have a surprised expression. She already knew Ron's strength. Even when they first met, Ron's strength had already surpassed Highforth's, let alone now. The reason why she chose to stand out at this time was to express her position and show goodwill to Ron. At this moment, the classroom bell rang, and Vivian let out a long sigh. She finally found a way out. Today's class ends here. Class dismissed. Highforth also knew that today's fight was not going to happen. His eyes revealed a vicious expression. Stinking brat, I won't let today's matter end like this. Just wait and see if you have the ability. He glanced at Godely and moved his mouth, but didn't say anything. He turned and walked out. Ron smiled and withdrew his bone spear, replying, "Anytime." Godely also withdrew her magic and ran to Ron's side under the envious gazes of everyone. "Are you all right?" Ron glanced at her and smiled. "Thank you." "You're welcome. I know he's no match for you," Godely said with a smile. If Godely hadn't stood out, Ron would have had the chance to teach Highforth a lesson. With his current strength, even if he didn't summon the skeletal warriors, he could still beat Highforth to the ground in 3 minutes. To be honest, he felt a little regretful that he couldn't teach this arrogant fellow a lesson. "You don't have to say anything. I still have to thank you." Ron's suspicion of Godely had mostly disappeared. "It's good to have a friend like you." Godely's face bloomed with a smile. "So you admit that I'm your friend?" Ron nodded. "I killed Jordan to avenge my grandfather. Now that Jordan is dead, my revenge on the Salter family ends here. If you don't help my family harm me, I'll treat you as a friend." Godely was delighted and stuck out her tongue. "How would I dare? I can't beat you." Ron, come with me for a moment. At this moment, Vivian tidied up the things on the podium and said to him, Your mentor is calling for you. Godely and Ron were chatting happily. The boy and girl who had let go of their grudges and started to have a good impression of each other. When she heard Vivian call for him, disappointment appeared in Godely's eyes. All right, let's talk when we're free. Ron said goodbye to Godely and left the classroom. Mentor Vivian, where are you taking me? Vivian didn't say a word along the way and kept walking in front. Ron followed behind and couldn't help but ask. Vivian didn't answer. It was obvious that she was in a bad mood. Ron also tactfully kept his mouth shut. We're here, Vivian said softly when they arrived in front of a dilapidated house. Ron sized up the dilapidated building. It had long been covered in dust. He didn't know how long it had been since it had been cleaned. The windows, door frames, and everything was tattered. A gust of wind blew past, and half of the window fell off and made a creaking sound. Vivian's heart was heavy as she took out a key and opened the dilapidated door. Ron noticed that the dilapidated door was decorated with skulls. This is our necromancy major's classroom, Vivian said as she walked in. Ron immediately followed. Pornographic novels. There were only a few desks in the classroom. The desks were covered in dust and the windows, made of broken tinted glass, were densely covered in spiderwebs. At this moment, Ron's gaze fell on a stone statue not far away. Vivian walked closer to the statue and reached out to gently wipe the base of the statue. Soon, a small line of words appeared at the base of the statue. Tristalum Con. Ron looked at it and was puzzled. Who is he? Why is this statue placed here? Vivian stared at the statue and her eyes lit up. He is the progenitor of our necromancy major, Lord Tristalum Con. Progenitor? A huge question mark rose in Ron's heart. He looked at Homelin at the side. Homelin shook his head, indicating that he didn't know this person. Vivian's tone became heavy. About 5,000 years ago, our progenitor was very interested in the legendary necromancy magic when he was very young. When he was almost 70 years old, he finally found a book that described necromancy magic in an ancient ruin. It was a pity that this book was incomplete, as if it had been burned. There were densely packed ancient characters written on it. Lord Con was wild with joy. After nearly 10 years of dedicated research, he finally deciphered the necromancy magic in the book and imparted this legendary magic to the world, restoring the original history. The necromancy magic of the ancient times could no longer be investigated, but Lord Con restored the research of necromancy magic to its original state. It was he who revived the necromancy magic that had disappeared for many years and gave it a new lease of life. It is because of this that we necromancers respectfully call him the progenitor of necromancy magic. Homelin sighed silently. No wonder necromancy magic had become like this. It was restored based on that incomplete book. If the key pages were missing, the entire necromancy magic would have changed. This was the real reason why necromancy magic was called trash magic. The so-called progenitor of necromancy magic was just a person who restored necromancy magic. Although it had changed, no matter what, it was this person called Con who brought necromancy magic that had disappeared for many years to this world. It was not an exaggeration to call him the progenitor of necromancy magic. Thinking of this, Homelin couldn't help but feel deep respect for him. Vivian turned her head and smiled at Ron. Ron, you learned the basics of necromancy magic from the necromancers on the streets, right? This. Ron was at a loss for words. Vivian waved her hand. It's not your fault. Actually, I think you've seen it for yourself. The so-called necromancy magic isn't as powerful as the legends say. Those novels are all fictional. In those third-rate novels on the streets, necromancers are described as the embodiment of death, evil, and terror. But in reality, as necromancers, we naturally know what's going on. True necromancy magic doesn't have any power at all. No. No, those aren't true necromancy magic. Ron shouted in his heart. However, he couldn't say the truth, because Homelin had said that he didn't have the power now. Vivian smiled sadly. There are many versions of the legend of necromancy magic. In the legends, the ancient necromancers were almighty. The current necromancy magic isn't ancient necromancy magic at all. I'm afraid that the true ancient necromancy magic has been lost. Mentor Vivian, do you believe these words? Ron stared into Vivian's eyes. I don't know. Vivian shook her head. There was a period of time when I was very willing to believe it, but now, I don't know if I should believe it or not. Ron lowered his head and sighed softly. Vivian said, My father has been researching necromancy magic for a long time. He found some things in some ancient documents. It's these things that have been supporting my belief in the existence of ancient necromancy magic. Ron blinked and revealed a curious expression. What is it? Vivian hesitated. My father found out that necromancy magic was prevalent in ancient times. It happened to be around the same time as the god of the orcs, Hellscream, Nuga, and the god of the elves, goddess of the moon, Alice. Chapter 88. Vivian's beautiful eyes swept over him. What's wrong? Ron, you seem very surprised. No. It's nothing. Ron stammered. I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised at all, haha. He laughed dryly to cover up his embarrassment, and at the same time quietly asked Homelin's grandfather, Grandpa, do you know them? Homelin sighed. Not only do I know them, but they were also good friends. One of them was a totem saint of the orcs, and the other was a priestess of the moon of the elves. After I died, I don't know what happened to them. Ron asked, Who are they? Homelin said, They're a vassal race of the Scourge Church. Ron said, A vassal race. Homelin thought for a while. At that time, the Scourge Church was at its peak. Before that, it had conquered countless races, and these races all became our vassals, submitting to the Scourge Church. But now it seems that many races have disappeared, and only humans, elves, orcs, and magical beasts are left. Were there many races in the past? There were many. For example, there were the giants who were tall and trained in thunder magic. They were strong in close combat, and their thunder magic was terrifying. There were also the dwarves who had infinite strength and were proficient in the art of forging. There were also the goblins who were good at all kinds of precision machinery. There were also the halfling chefs who had no fighting ability, but were naturally good at cooking. There were too many races. Now it seems that only these few races are left. Ron thought for a while and asked, Grandpa, was the Scourge Church formed by humans at that time? Yes, humans. Homelin answered with certainty. What about the magical beast? Where were they at that time? Homelin said, Strictly speaking, magical beasts were not a single race. They were formed by many magical beast races. At that time, they were scattered all over the continent and did not form a unified force. I see. Ron nodded. He suddenly understood a lot of things. Well, Merlin sighed. I think we're getting closer and closer to the truth. With the clues we've found and my confirmation, it shouldn't be hard to uncover the truth. But for some reason, I feel a trace of fear. Just how much power would it take to topple the mighty Calamity Church? That's right. At this moment, Vivian stood up and smiled at Ron. The story of necromancy ends here. All right, shall we start learning now? Study? Ron asked in surprise. Here? Vivian smiled. Of course it's here. Do we have any other classrooms? Clean this place up and you can use it. Oh yes. Vivian rolled up her sleeve. Come, let's use our hands to restore this place to its original state. They took a rag, a broom, a bucket, and other things from the corner. Without saying a word, the two immediately got to work. They swept the floor clean, wiped the dust off the table, fixed the windows, and threw away the ones that couldn't be fixed. After working for more than 2 hours, they finally finished all the work. Looking at the new classroom, they were indescribably happy. Vivian and Ron looked at each other and laughed happily. Vivian suddenly felt playful. She reached out her dirty hand and wiped Ron's face. "Hey Ron, your face is dirty. Are you sure?" Ron wiped his face with his hand. Who knew that when he wiped it, his little face became even dirtier? This made Vivian laugh heartily. Ron also laughed embarrassedly. The two of them were about the same age. Vivian was only 23 years old, and still had a childlike innocence. After some tossing and turning, the two of them finally sat down. Ron sat on the chair and Vivian stood on the podium. "All right, let's start the class. The first lesson is the summary of necromancy magic. Ron, the book in your hand was written by the ancestor of necromancy magic, Lord Khan. Of course, it's a handwritten copy. It records some of the basic elements of necromancy magic. Of course, this necromancy magic is more profound than the necromancers on the streets." Vivian vividly described the lesson. Her voice was very pleasant, as if she was telling a story. She deliberately slowed down when she explained the theory of magic, so that Ron could hear it more clearly and accept it faster. Ron listened as he flipped to the first page of the book. He had no choice but to look through it. He quickly saw a few errors, and most importantly, these errors were the most fatal. They were the complete opposite of the necromancy magic theory he was learning. The biggest mistake was that there was no method to cultivate soul power. Homelin shook his head as he listened. "Ridiculous! Ridiculous! Her theory is completely wrong. No wonder she summoned a useless skeleton. Besides, summoning skeletons is only one of the ways necromancers fight. Don't tell me necromancers only rely on summoning skeletons to fight? There are even more profound necromancy magics." Ron was stunned. "More profound necromancy magics? What's that?" Homelin stroked his beard. "Of course there are. For example, you learned how to refine zombies and curses. This is a very powerful mental attack. Of course, with your current strength, you can't learn it yet." "Oh." Ron nodded. He lowered his head and seriously read the book. After a while, he said, "Grandpa Homelin, is it because they don't cultivate soul power that they can summon useless skeletons?" Homelin nodded. "That's right. Soul power is the foundation of necromancy magic. It's also the source of power. A skeleton without soul power is just a skeleton. Even if he summons a bone dragon, it's useless. It's just a skeleton that can move," Homelin said. "That Khan's necromancy theory was wrong from the start. I think he must have read some literature and learned that necromancers control skeletons. However, he only saw the surface and thought that necromancy magic was the magic to summon skeletons. This is a big mistake. Necromancy magic cultivates the soul. With the soul as the core, these skeletons will become real warriors and not just a pile of useless bones. If I'm not wrong, this guy called Khan should be a magician. He studied necromancy magic with magic as the foundation. In fact, these are two completely different things. He first summoned skeletons and then used his mental strength to control them. This research direction was wrong from the start. Necromancy magic doesn't require mental strength, but soul power. Ron thought for a while and said, "Grandpa, should I remind her that she's wrong?" Homelin shook his head. "Now is not the time. Just listen carefully. Treat it as a story, but don't take it to heart." After an hour, Vivian finally finished the first lesson. She put down the book and looked up at Ron. "How was it? Did you understand the first lesson? If there's anything you don't understand, just ask." Ron replied, "Mentor Vivian, I think I already understand." "Understand? So fast?" Vivian's eyes widened in disbelief. He actually understood those cryptic terms and those extremely complicated and profound magic theories so quickly? That's impossible, right? She thought back to when she first started to understand it. It took her a long time to understand. Vivian coughed. "Since you understand, summon a skeleton for me to see." Yes, Mentor Vivian, Ron replied. He did understand. Those cryptic terms were nothing out of the ordinary for a genuine necromancer like him. As for those complicated pornographic novels, they were nothing out of the ordinary. He didn't listen to the magic theories at all because Grandpa Homelin said that they were wrong. Summoning skeletons was now a piece of cake for Ron. He didn't take out his bone staff. Instead, he raised his hand and muttered a long string of magic incantations. Vivian listened carefully. Suddenly, she frowned and interrupted Ron's spellcasting. Wrong! The correct incantation should be %#yen***. Ron was stunned. He had unknowingly chanted the incantation to summon a skeleton warrior. No wonder Vivian felt that something was wrong. Now repeat after me. At this time, Vivian was just like a strict teacher. Ron had no choice but to follow Vivian's incantation, even though it was obviously wrong. Not long after, a pile of bones appeared in front of Ron. These bones quickly assembled to form the shape of a human. This skeleton was dull and lifeless, without a trace of spiritual energy. It was similar to a walking corpse. More accurately, it was worse than a walking corpse. As for the fact that it could move on its own, that's great. He didn't expect Vivian to be so excited. Genius. Ron, you are simply a genius. In just a short 2 hours, you actually learned this necromancy magic? Ron was sweating profusely. The difficulty of this wrong version of necromancy magic was not even worth mentioning when compared to real necromancy magic. As a real necromancer, summoning it was as simple as eating and drinking. Real necromancy magic was extremely profound and complicated. Fortunately, Ron had a brilliant mentor like Homelin. Under his guidance, Ron was able to make such great progress. Ron, now, control the skeleton to walk around and take a look, Vivian said excitedly. Control? How can I control it without spiritual energy? My thoughts can't connect with this skeleton. Ron tried to control the skeleton, but it didn't move at all. Vivian said seriously, Ron, use your spiritual energy. Concentrate. Ron took a deep breath. Imitating a mage, he used a small amount of spiritual energy. Sure enough, the skeleton raised its hand. So difficult. Just doing this action made Ron sweat profusely. Using spiritual energy to move the skeleton was really too difficult. No wonder this skeleton was like a puppet. It would be strange if it could fight. Just as others said, an adult holding a wooden stick could smash this skeleton into pieces. Alright, let's stop here for today. Vivian looked at her student's tired appearance and couldn't help but feel some heartache. Ron relaxed his mind and the skeleton disappeared into the air. His whole body also seemed to fall apart, limp and not wanting to move. This wrong method of summoning was really too difficult. Looking at Ron's incomparably depressed expression, Homelin was already laughing until his stomach hurt. Vivian took out a handkerchief and gently wiped the sweat on Ron's forehead. She said softly, Your spiritual energy consumption is too great. Go back and have a good rest. Come back tomorrow, okay? Ron nodded. Chapter 89. Ron bid farewell to Vivian. Seeing that it was already quite late, he hurried back. When he rushed back to his classroom, he found that the classroom was crowded with people. Ron asked curiously, What's going on? It was fine if he didn't speak, but when Ron opened his mouth, dozens of pairs of eyes looked at him, as if they had caught a criminal. It's him, he's Ron, he's finally back. I thought he was a coward. Ron was stunned. What was going on? It was as if these people were looking for him. At this time, an older senior wearing a white magic robe quickly walked in front of Ron. His expression was serious. Ron, right? We've been looking for you for a long time. Seeing the senior, Ron didn't dare to neglect. You are? The senior wearing a white magic robe slightly raised the corner of his mouth. It's High Firth looking for you. He wants you to go to the duel arena. High Firth? The duel arena? Ron's brows slightly wrinkled. Yes. The senior tilted his head, his face showing an expression that was not a smile. Right now, right away, at this point, Ron also understood what was going on. He had offended Highforth, so he sent people to take revenge on him. Ron's face suddenly turned cold. What if I don't go? Don't go. The senior raised his eyelids slightly and curled his lip. Several seniors quickly surrounded him. You! Ron's heart went cold. Before he could understand, more than a dozen people surrounded him and stared at him with malicious eyes. It was as if he moved, he would be beaten up like a pig's head. The seniors surrounding him were all seniors. They all had the strength of intermediate warrior level or above. The one standing in front of him who gave the order had the strength of a senior mage. Ron's heart sank slightly. He understood that if he refused, he would immediately be besieged by a large number of advanced professionals. With his current strength, he was afraid that he would not be able to gain any advantage unless he was possessed by Grandpa Homelin. Forget it. It's good to follow them. Anyway, the matter with Firth High will be solved sooner or later. Ron thought for a moment and replied. Okay, I'll go with you. The senior smiled and didn't say anything. Instead, he gracefully made an inviting gesture, as if he wasn't here to pick a fight, but to invite someone to have a meal. The other seniors sandwiched Ron in the middle, afraid that he would run away. Ron followed the white-robed senior all the way through the corridor and up the stairs, all the way to the dueling ground. The group of freshmen saw that there was something interesting to watch and immediately followed. There's going to be a good show, a trainee said. It was obvious that he was quite excited. Quick! Don't block the way. Another freshman pushed and walked forward. When the freshmen in the same class heard this, they shook their head. Alas, of all people to offend, he just had to offend Firth High. Is that guy easy to provoke? I heard that the one called Ron is a necromancer. A freshman in the same class said. He's dead for sure, the freshman said with a gloating expression on his face. Let's go take a look too. Several freshmen nodded after hearing this and followed out. This kind of news spread from 1 to 10, 10 to 100, and soon it spread among the freshmen. Those freshmen immediately put down what they were doing and quickly chased after them. There were more and more freshmen, and soon they formed a torrent, rolling straight to the dueling ground where Firth High was. The surging stream of people passed through the campus. Except for those excited freshmen, the seniors showed disdain on their faces. What else could freshmen be so excited about? Fighting. As if they had never fought before. What's going on over there? In the cafeteria of the school, the beautiful Princess Kadena, who had long azure hair and was wearing a blue magic robe, pointed to the distance and asked, what else could it be? Fighting. Those freshmen are really bored. If they have the ability, why don't they fight with the Soaring Dragon Academy? What kind of ability is it to fight in your own school? The one who spoke was another beauty. She was one of the important figures in the dormitory of the Academy ranking tournament's first place, the silver-winged Pegasus Knight Shea. She was currently together with her good friend Kadena. In the dormitory of the Academy ranking tournament's first place, the Captain Mocklin had something to do today, and the others had also forgotten about their own matters. The two beauties were bored and only went to the cafeteria to eat some food while chatting with each other. When Kadena heard this, she immediately became interested. Sister Shea, you seem to be very clear about it. Tell me, what's going on? What else could it be? Shea played with the already empty cup in her hand. Half of her body was lying on the table, and one hand was supporting her head. She weakly said, Isn't it that freshman, that guy called Firth High? I don't know why he's causing trouble again. Didn't he have a conflict with a senior last time? Now he's actually fighting with a freshman. Kadena was astonished. Firth High. Could it be that Heffel's younger brother? If it's not him, then who? Shea disdainfully smiled. If it wasn't for his brother Heffel's, Do you think he would dare to be so arrogant in school? I would have already told people to take care of him. Oh right, Kadena said. That guy beat up the senior on the first day of school. He beat him until his face was covered in blood. In the end, nothing happened, and Heifels had to clean up his mess. Shea curled her lips and straightened her body. Speaking of which, that senior is too disappointing. He couldn't even beat a junior. Too embarrassing. Kadena rolled her eyes and said with a smile, Sister Shea, why don't we go and take a look? Not going. Shea lazily lied on the table, as if her whole body was not feeling well. What's there to see about those juniors fighting? If you want to go, you go. I'm not going, Sister Shea. Go, not going. Go. Kadena unknowingly sat beside Shea. She tightly hugged her and acted like a spoiled child. At the same time, she used her plump chest to rub Shea's body. Shea laughed and scolded, You little slut, if you want to go then go. Why are you pestering me? At this moment, Shea's expression suddenly froze. She saw a familiar figure and could not help but open her mouth wide. Sister Shea, what's wrong? Kadena hurriedly asked. It's him. Shea could not help but rub her eyes. Now that she could see clearly, it was him. The child who had defeated her at the mere age of 15. Sister Shea, who are you talking about? Kadena was astonished. Shea fiercely slammed her fist on the table, causing the things on the table to jump up. Despicable guy, Kadena was shocked. She had never seen the amiable Sister Shea so angry. She looked out the window and saw a thin and weak figure. Who is that guy? I don't know him. Kadena confirmed that she did not know this person. However, her mind turned. To be able to make Sister Shea so angry, could it be? Thinking of this, Kadena suddenly woke up. A few days ago, she had heard that the necromancy major, which had not recruited any students for several years, suddenly had a new student. Could it be him, Sister Shea? Is it that necromancer? The exceptionally intelligent Kadena immediately thought of the crux of the matter. Shea's body suddenly trembled. She had only told Kadena that she had lost to a 15-year-old necromancer. Who would have thought that she would be able to deduce it from such a small clue? She was indeed worthy of being a princess of the imperial family. At that time, it was Kadena who had discovered it when she saw the crack in Shea's armor. After repeated questioning, Shea finally told her. Yes, it's him. Who would have thought that he would actually come to the Balarax Academy? Shea clenched her fists and said through gritted teeth, I want revenge. I want to defeat him and wash away my shame. After saying this, Shea suddenly stood up and pulled Kadena towards the duel arena. She was as hurried as a gust of wind, completely different from her previous languid demeanor. Hey, Sister Shea, we still haven't paid. Kadena called out, but the impatient Shea had dragged her away. Huff, huff, huff. Godeli quickly ran through the academy's corridors. She had just learned that Ron had been taken away by Firth High's people. As soon as she heard this, she became anxious. She immediately put down what she was doing and asked where they were before chasing after them. Ouch! Godeli wasn't paying attention and bumped into a person's body. She only felt that the other person's body was soft and had a fragrant smell. It seemed to be a girl. The young and weak Godeli was thrown far away. She rubbed her aching head and saw a tall and beautiful figure. Behind that figure stood a great beauty wearing a blue magic robe. These two people were Shea and Kadena. They were also walking towards the duel arena. Godeli bumped into Shea. What kind of physique did Shea have? She was nearly 1.8 meters tall and was a knight. Naturally, Godeli was at a disadvantage. She bumped into Shea's plump chest. If it was someone else, Shea would have already flipped out. But when she saw a 13-year-old little sister, her anger subsided. Kadena hurriedly asked with concern, Little sister, are you okay? Godeli raised her head and looked at Shea and Kadena. She immediately got up and said, Two seniors, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Shea coldly snorted. Next time, be careful when you walk. Oh, yes. Godeli replied. She didn't have time to say hello and hurriedly ran towards the duel arena. What a strange person. Shea looked at Godeli's back and said, No way? I think this little sister is very cute. Kadena covered her mouth and laughed. Let's go. Shea pushed Kadena. The so-called duel arena was on top of an abandoned building in the academy. It was going to be demolished. Before it was demolished, it was the headquarters of the Firth of the Sea. The duel arena, as the name suggested, was a place where students dueled each other. Many students settled their grievances here. This place was relatively hidden, so they didn't have to be afraid of being discovered by the academy's teachers. Now, the duel arena was already crowded with people. Those who came here to watch the fun were all freshmen. There were also some seniors, but very few of them. For those seniors, this kind of thing was already commonplace in the Ballarak's academy. It could only be regarded as a cheap trick. Chapter 90. Get out of the way, quickly let me in. When Shea and Kadena arrived at the entrance of the abandoned building, a voice attracted their attention. Sister Shea, look, isn't that the little girl from before? Kadena pointed in that direction and said. Shea took a closer look. Sure enough, the little girl who had bumped into her was being stopped by a senior student, and she was in the middle of an argument. I'm sorry, Miss Godeli, but I can't let you in, the white-robed magician said unhurriedly. He wasn't tall, but he was like an iron wall in front of Godeli. Godeli's face darkened. Why? Can they all go in? The white-robed magician smiled. No reason. This is High Firth's special order. If you want to go in, you can, but only if you can defeat us. The white-robed magician's group of 4 had the strength of a senior professional. Godeli was only an intermediate magician, so defeating them would be as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Godeli bit her lips. She naturally knew that these people were specially arranged by High Firth to stop her, so that she wouldn't be able to ruin High Firth's business. Looking at the white-robed magician who was smiling very kindly, Godeli began to ponder. High Firth's strength is around the middle 3rd stage of the warrior rank, and I'm at the middle 5th stage of the warrior rank. Ron's strength should be a bit stronger than mine, so dealing with High Firth shouldn't be a problem. However, I'm afraid that if they gang up on him, Ron will be at a disadvantage. At this moment, she sighed in her heart. Forget it, forget it. With these few senior fellows here, I'm afraid I won't be able to help much. Godeli could only leave in dejection. Shea and Kadena looked at each other and walked forward. Frezino, what are you doing here? Shea asked coldly. When the white-robed magician saw this, he thought, oh my God, why did he drag these 2 ladies into this? He couldn't afford to offend either of them. As one of the strongest teams in the academy, Shea and Kadena had a very high reputation in the academy. Frezino could only smile obsequiously. 2 great beauties, how come you have time to come here today? Shea snorted. Let me ask you, what are they doing up there? Ha! Frezino chuckled. It's nothing. It's just a few freshmen fooling around. It's not a big deal, Kadena smiled. Who's fooling around with who? Why do I seem to have heard that this has something to do with Heifels? Kadena's smile charmed Frezino so much that he stuttered. Yes. One of the duelists, High Firth, is Heifels's younger brother. Who's the other one? Shea asked. Frezino smiled. I think it's the new necromancer this year. His name is Ron. He's just a small character, not worth mentioning. Sure enough, it's him. Shea and Kadena glanced at each other. Shea's eyes contained a trace of hatred. That day, the scene of him suffering a crushing defeat at the hands of a 15-year-old child was still vivid in his mind. Recalling the figure of the girl who had just left, Kadena understood immediately. Disdain appeared on her face. So you're standing here to stop his friend from going in there. It's that girl just now. She seems to be quite strong. No, no. Frezino laughed dryly. Seeing Cadina's unfriendly expression, he jumped in fright and hurriedly said, "It's like this. High Firth knows that girl too. He was afraid that she would go up there and cause trouble, so he asked me to stop her." "Humph. So it's true." Cadina sniffled her cute little nose gently. Shea said coldly, "So, if we want to go up, you'll stop us too? Do I have to defeat you before I can go in?" Frezino jumped in fright. Fight with this lady? What a joke. Who didn't know that Shea was one of the geniuses of the Balrock's Academy? Although Frezino was also a senior professional, he was far from being comparable to Shea. "No. I wouldn't dare." In front of Shea and Cadina, Frezino immediately cowered. He extended his hand and gestured for them to enter. "Miss Shea, Miss Cadina, how would I dare to stop you? Please come in." Ron was escorted by his seniors to the duel arena. The arena was already crowded with students who were watching the show. Some people had sympathy in their eyes, while others were gloating. High Firth was already waiting in the duel arena. When he saw Ron, he revealed a cruel smile. He had thought of thousands of ways to torture this necromancer who dared to talk back to him. He wanted to vent the anger in his heart and establish his authority in front of the freshmen. As for God Eli, he was not worried at all. Naturally, someone would take care of this matter. Ron walked to the duel arena. The arena was filled with people who were watching the show. The smell of sweat in the air was a little unpleasant. In the middle of the duel arena, there was a large empty space. Ron knew that this was the place where he and High Firth would settle their problems. At this time, he saw High Firth. The latter smiled and waved at him. At this time, he felt his body being pushed directly to the center of the arena. At this time, there was a burst of cheers from the crowd, and the atmosphere became even more lively. Ron turned around and glared fiercely at the senior who pushed him. That pair of eyes full of murderous intent made the senior's heart tremble, and he broke out in cold sweat. "Damn it, why is this guy's gaze so scary?" The senior gritted his teeth and forced himself to calm down. He raised his hand, but there was a flash of astonishment in his eyes. Why is my hand trembling? Am I afraid? Why should I be afraid? He's just a good-for-nothing necromancer." On the barrier of the duel arena, a few men and women were sitting on it, talking and laughing wittily. They did not seem to care about the people around them. "This is the Ron you were talking about? He doesn't look like much," one of the red-haired girls said indifferently. "He's just a good-for-nothing snack." "Dear, I think you're making a big fuss over a small issue." The red-haired girl was also this year's special enrollment. She came from a family in the Holy Empire. Even a fool could see that she liked High Firth. The other people sitting in the same dormitory as High Firth. There were seniors and freshmen. These people respectfully called High Firth their boss. "Ishalot, you don't understand." High Firth smiled evilly. "I want to beat this good-for-nothing in front of everyone, so that he can't raise his head in front of the whole school. In the end, he can only leave the school with his tail between his legs." Hee. Ishalot laughed, her red hair fluttering in the wind. "High Firth, it's not wrong to say that you're making a big fuss over a small issue. Is it necessary to treat a good-for-nothing like this? If you don't like him, it's better to just kill him." High Firth smiled. "The school forbids killing people. Besides, letting him die so easily is not fun at all." With that, High Firth no longer paid attention to Ishalot. He jumped down from the barrier and looked straight at Ron. "Ron, you're finally here. You can't hide anymore, right? I've almost mobilized the whole school to find you. I've been waiting for a long time." Ron helplessly shook his head. High Firth's pornographic novel. "Firth, you're called High Firth, right? If you want to fight, I'll accompany you at any time. But I don't think you need to call so many people to watch, right?" "Hee, are you afraid?" High Firth licked his lips with a smile. I want to beat you down in front of so many people and make you lose face. Let's see if you still dare to stand up against me. Hee hee, you want to be a hero, right? You want to save your mentor, right? Let me tell you that there's a price to pay for being a hero. Ron shook his head. I originally wanted to teach you a lesson in secret, but I didn't expect you to call so many people to watch. Haven't you thought that if you lose, you'll be the one who loses face? Ha ha. The surrounding freshmen suddenly roared with laughter. They were laughing at Ron's shameless boasting. A necromancer with combat power only existed in legends and had never appeared in reality. On the other hand, Highfield's face was flushed red. He took the surrounding laughter as mockery. A necromancer dared to oppose him, making him lose face. He was so angry that he laughed. Good. Ron, I hope your strength is as good as your words. A guy who only knows how to talk is useless. Highfirth's heart was ruthless. He clenched his fists, and a faint do-chi overflowed from his body. His body gradually turned red. I originally only wanted to humiliate him, but since you're looking for death, then don't blame me. Highfirth swore in his heart that he would beat this reckless guy half to death. It's starting. The surrounding students clamored, pushing the atmosphere to a climax. Even the air became hot, and this group of people who wished for the world to be in chaos began to shout madly. Highfirth, beat him. Do your best, Highfirth, I'm optimistic about you. Haha, beat him down. At this time, all kinds of chaotic voices gradually converged, like a chant, turning into the same voice. Beat him. Beat him. Beat him. No one was optimistic about Ron, not a single one. Everyone was cheering for Highfirth, and even those who had originally sympathized with Ron were now supporting Firth. In this world where strength was everything, the weak never needed cheap sympathy. Homelin smiled faintly. His thoughts returned to the times when he was young and passionate. He wasn't worried about Ron at all. Ron, you should be able to deal with this guy, right? Ron nodded slightly, a trace of a smile in his eyes. Grandpa Homelin, if I can't even deal with this guy, then my necromancy magic would have been in vain, and I wouldn't be worthy of being your disciple. Chapter 91. The atmosphere on the rooftop had already reached its climax. Shouts and cheers were incessant as all the freshmen excitedly watched Highfirth trample on that pitiful necromancer. It's him. Kadena followed Shea up to the rooftop. Her eyes widened in surprise as she wanted to see the person who had defeated Sister Shea. She couldn't help but be disappointed when she saw who it was. Search for the latest updates here. An ordinary-looking child with a head of unlikable black hair stood in the crowd. His thin and weak figure was standing in the crowd. Amidst the one-sided cheers, his eyes revealed a hint of determination. That's right, it's him. When enemies meet, their eyes turn red. Shea's eyes looked like they were about to spit fire. In her heart, Ron had already been killed 101 times. It can't be? He's so powerful? Sister Shea, who do you think will win? Kadena said with a smile. Shea said, if he summons that skeleton knight from that day, then he'll definitely win. No one here is a match for that skeleton knight. Kadena shrugged her shoulders. Sister Shea, have you read too many third-rate novels? How can you believe in the legend of necromancers? Shea didn't want to waste time with her. If you don't believe me, then keep watching and you'll know. The atmosphere on the stage had already reached its peak, and the air seemed to have frozen. Ron, I'll let you know the consequences of offending me. At this time, Highfirth shouted loudly. He moved, and his fist was suffused with a red light. He fiercely struck out, and sparks flew from his fist. The people nearby felt a wave of heat and had no choice but to retreat. Insignificant skill. Ron coldly snorted. He raised his white hand and a black energy appeared in his palm. In that instant, a bone shield appeared out of thin air. Bone shield, black energy swirled around the white bone shield, and a tyrannical cyclone was released. This was one of the differences between ancient necromancers and modern necromancers. Soul power. Boom. High Firth's iron fist collided with Ron's bone shield, creating a powerful wave of fire that scattered in all directions, forcing everyone to take a step back. Ron raised his shield and blocked Firth High's attack. A deep fist imprint appeared on the bone shield, and the powerful fire burned the entire bone shield black, but Ron still managed to block it. What? No one had expected a necromancer to be able to block an attack, but Ron had done it. The scene was dead silent. Everyone's eyes widened exaggeratedly, and their jaws almost fell to the ground. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, no one would have believed that a useless necromancer could actually block the attack of an intermediate swordsman, even though High Firth didn't use a weapon. How? How is this possible? High Firth High was also stunned. He was the closest to Ron, so he could clearly feel the other's power. It was real power, and definitely not below his. How is this possible? Kadena rubbed her beautiful big eyes to make sure she wasn't seeing things. Sister Shea, is he really a necromancer? He's not a swordsman pretending to be a necromancer, is he? Shea's face didn't have a trace of surprise. She had already experienced Ron's strength. She replied in a deep voice, "That's right, he is a necromancer." He is that strong, however. Shea also felt strange. This Ron's strength was a lot weaker than before. The Ron she met at that time could only be described as unfathomable. Although he only displayed the strength of a master, the fear he brought to Shea had already surpassed that of a master. Shea had also encountered this feeling before. It was when he was standing in front of the dean. It was the same feeling. Of course, Shea didn't know that she wasn't facing Ron at that time, but Homelin, the red-haired Charlotte, couldn't hide the shock on her face. How is this possible? Aren't necromancers vulnerable? How could he block High Firth High's fist? Is this an illusion? Impossible, necromancers can't have such powerful strength. It must be a fluke. High Firth High quickly recovered from the shock. He comforted himself and said to Ron, "You have some ability. You actually summoned a bone to block my attack. But I can tell you that this kind of trick is useless." The bone shield in Ron's hand wasn't an ordinary bone. The bone summoned through the power of the soul was harder than steel. He smiled and said, "I think you should be a swordsman. How about it? Don't you plan to use a weapon?" High Firth High raised his fist. His fist flashed with a raging flame. He grinned and said, "Why would I need a weapon to deal with you? Just my pair of fists is enough." After that, High Firth High no longer spoke nonsense. He raised his fist and crazily punched at Ron. Boom, boom, boom. In the fierce collision between High Firth High and Ron, there was a loud bang. The flames burned, sending out heat waves, and the bone shield in Ron's hand was riddled with holes. Ron, on the other hand, was in no hurry. He waved his shield so that it was impervious to wind and rain. No matter which angle Highfield attacked from, he cleverly resolved it. But what made High Firth High especially depressed was that just when he thought he was about to break the shield, the other party's black gas rose up and repaired the broken bone shield in an instant. This made High Firth High so angry that he almost died. The eyes of the surrounding students gradually became filled with astonishment. The appearance of Ron holding a bone shield completely subverted their understanding of necromancers. Ron's image in their eyes instantly became lofty. "Come on, Ron, come on. Beat him. Get rid of High Firth High." The emotions of the people were very familiar with arousing. There was no exception to the mentality of admiring the strong. The voices cheering for Ron gradually increased. These voices grew louder and louder as High Firth High lost. High Firth High was so angry that his lungs were about to explode. Not to mention that he couldn't take down Leyland after so long, the other party still had a relaxed expression on his face. This made him want to vomit blood. No, this is definitely a fluke, a fluke. A necromancer can't have this kind of strength. This guy is so powerful. Kadina's beautiful eyes flashed as she exclaimed, "Now I understand why you were defeated by a necromancer. His strength is very good. Look at him handling the situation with ease. High Firth High isn't his opponent at all." Shea took a deep breath. "His strength is far more than that." Several of High Firth High's comrades in the dormitory looked at each other. Among them, the red-haired girl, Charlotte, said, "Do you think we should rush up to help him? That's not good, right?" A brown-haired boy wearing half-body armor said hesitantly, "This is a duel between two people. The other party is just a necromancer. If we rush up like a swarm of bees, even if we win, it will be a disgrace. Look, is that guy still a necromancer?" Charlotte pointed to Ron in the field and said. Several people shook their heads. They all knew that Charlotte was telling the truth. The strength displayed by the other party was indeed not something a trash necromancer could possess. The brown-haired boy had to say, however, "If we intervene, young Master High Firth High won't be happy." "He just told us that we don't need to intervene," Charlotte naturally remembered. She only sighed slightly and didn't speak. In the duel between High Firth High and Ron, flames flickered. High Firth High raised his strength to the highest level. His body was full of fire chi. From a distance, he looked like a man on fire. Under the cover of the flames, no one noticed that a trace of black gas was dissipating and spreading, competing with High Firth High's fire chi. Ron, who had been passively defending, was also angry. He coldly snorted, "Have you fought enough? If you have, it will be my turn, High Firth High. Trash, do you have the ability to fight back?" "Ron, humph, I'll let you see how powerful I am." Ron was no longer polite. With a move of his palm, a powerful soul force shot out. Not long after, a white bone spear appeared in his hand. "Look, he's taking out something new again," a student yelled. "It's a bone stick," another said. "Can that thing hit people?" a girl asked timidly. "Of course, look at his bone shield. It's so powerful." The bone spear in Ron's hand stabbed out like lightning. The sharp tip was like a sharp blade, making a strong sound as it pierced through the air. Whoosh! High Firth High was greatly shocked. He was very anxious because he couldn't defeat Ron for a long time. The strength of the other party had also become unclear. He was like a bird startled by the twang of a bow. Any movement of Ron made him tremble with fear. Seeing the bone spear piercing towards him, the only command that flashed in High Firth High's mind was to retreat and avoid the other party's attack. He didn't dare to imagine what would happen if the bone spear pierced his body. Ron seemed to have anticipated his actions. With a flick of his bone spear, he made High Firth High spin in a circle. Then, the bone spear swept towards his feet. High Firth High didn't expect him to do this. He couldn't dodge in time and fell to the ground. The back of his head hit the ground, making a dong sound. Ha ha ha! High Firth High's fall was very funny, causing the surrounding students to laugh. Even Shea and Kadina had a smile on their faces. Ron's strength was far above his. He did this to play with High Firth High. In his heart, he had never regarded High Firth High as an opponent. High Firth High also had the same idea, but the result made everyone's jaws drop. Pornographic novels. High Firth High's face had already swelled to the color of a pig's liver. He clenched his teeth and was about to get up and use his strongest do chi to fight Ron to the death. At this time, a cold bone spear was in front of him. Chapter 92. You lost. This sentence was no less than a clap of thunder in High Firth's ears. I lost? I lost? How is this possible? How could I lose to a good-for-nothing necromancer? How is this possible? High Firth's mind went blank. He had not yet recovered from the shock. High Firth! The red-haired girl, Charlotte, exclaimed and rushed over with her roommates. Ron coldly shouted, "Don't come over!" As he said that, he raised the bone spear in his hand. Ishalot did not dare to move, but she looked at Ron with fierce eyes. Ron did not have a good impression of this beautiful girl. He turned to High Firth and coldly said, "See yellow novel. Firth, today's matter is over. I don't want you to provoke me again, do you understand?" With that, Ron's hand moved, and the bone spear turned into a cloud of black gas, disappearing in front of everyone. Amazing, the surrounding students showed a blazing look in their eyes. In their eyes, Ron was no longer a good-for-nothing. He proved with his strength that necromancers were also very powerful. Sure enough, he won. Kadena murmured, "Is this still a necromancer? How come it's completely different from what I know?" Shea took a deep breath and said, "At first, I was as shocked as you. I thought that it was impossible for me to lose to a 15-year-old boy. Moreover, that boy was also a good-for-nothing necromancer. But the fact is, I was wrong, ridiculously wrong." Ron smiled coldly and strode away. The students consciously stepped aside to make a path. Some of the girls' eyes were full of sparkling stars, and their faces were full of worship. "High Firth, are you okay?" The red-haired girl, Ishalot, reached out to help High Firth up and softly said. Anger, unwillingness, shame, all kinds of negative emotions tore at his heart. His body was trembling, and his thoughts became extremely unstable. Finally, Highfield couldn't take it anymore. His humiliation had reached its limit. Suddenly, his hand flashed, and a dark gold longsword appeared in his hand. At this time, he stood up and shouted, "Ron, go to hell!" No one expected this change. High Firth had already made his move. The dark gold long sword emitted a strong light, making everyone unable to open their eyes. Blade of fire, under the powerful pressure of blade of fire, the surrounding air burned. High Firth was already dizzy. He was serious, he wanted to kill Ron. "Ron, be careful." At this moment, Shea could not help but exclaim. She did not know why, but she had an impulse to save him. Even without Shea's reminder, Ron had been vigilant behind him. Just like hunting in the mountains, he had never really left his back to others. He had always been paying attention. Ron coldly snorted, "Reckless thing, I thought you were really reflecting. Since that's the case, I won't be polite." A powerful black gas condensed in his hand and turned into a ball of light in an instant. The ball of light spun in Ron's hand. That ball of light was filled with the power of death. Death coil, Ron's eyes were cold. At this moment, he decided not to hold back. Boom, High Firth's body was blasted in midair. His whole body flew out, and a trace of blood spurted out from his mouth, sprinkling a beautiful flower of blood. Crash! Crash! Highfield's body crashed into an old desk at the side, and the entire desk toppled over, making a loud noise. High Firth! Ishalot did not care about anything else and immediately ran over like a mad woman. High Firth's face was like gold paper. A black soul force was constantly twining around his body, and he was unconscious. Ron coldly threw down a sentence, "Serves you right." After saying that, he no longer paid attention to the others and strode away. Kadena playfully looked at Shea. "Sister Shea, I didn't hear it. What did you say just now?" Shea's face turned red. She coldly snorted and said, "Yes, I was just reminding him. I don't want him to die in the hands of that trash High Firth. If I, Shea, want revenge, I can't borrow the hands of others. That hateful guy Ron, if he wants to die, he can only die in my hands." After watching the show, the students dispersed one after another. These new students walked while excitedly discussing the matter just now. Ron's strength had left a deep impression in their hearts. "Oh, is that so?" Kadena smiled and said, "That hateful guy has already left. Sister Shea, should we chase after him?" "Chase, of course we have to chase. How can I let him go?" Shea said while gnashing her teeth. In a small independent bungalow in the Balarax Academy, this was the residence of the Academy's upper echelons. In the academy, students who were strong and had good results were generally allocated residences by the academy. Moreover, they were all high-class students' residences. It was completely different from the residences of ordinary students. In a luxuriously decorated hall, the furniture inside was made of high-class hardwood, revealing a grand European style everywhere. In the hall, a burly man with a gloomy face said in his unique low voice, "What the F***ck is going on?" On a luxurious large bed, High Firth's eyes were tightly shut. It was unknown whether he was dead or alive. Beside him, a beautiful woman was carefully examining his body. Looking at her attire, it was obvious that she was a priest. The burly man's gaze swept to Fresno, who was beside him. The white-robed magician Fresno's heart trembled. He immediately stood up and said, "Boss, this has nothing to do with me." "Nothing to do with you?" The burly man looked up and glanced at him. Yes. Fresno was just replying when suddenly, the burly man stood up and raised a palm the size of a cattail leaf fan. Slap! Fresno was slapped in the face with a crisp sound. Fresno covered his face and said with a long face, Ugh, boss." The burly man pointed at him and said word by word, "My little brother was beaten up like this, and you say it has nothing to do with you." The burly man was High Firth's older brother, Hefels. He was a high-class knight and was known as the Tiger King. His mount was a fierce black tiger with long fangs. At this time, a white light floated up. The beautiful woman used a healing spell. Everyone's eyes were attracted by the white light, and they forgot to breathe. Hefels was so nervous that he was sweating. The white light flashed, and the beautiful priestess opened her eyes. She frowned and looked at Hefels helplessly, shaking her head. Hefels frowned. "Missoya, what's going on? Your healing spell doesn't seem to work." Missoya was the beautiful priestess. She was Hefels's wife, and they had just gotten married last month. According to seniority, High Firth should call her sister-in-law. Missoya shook her head and said in a clear voice, "High Firth wasn't injured, so my healing spell didn't work on him. He seems to have been cursed." "Curse? There's such a thing now?" Hefels was shocked and hurriedly asked, "Then what should we do?" Missoya pondered for a moment. "To remove the curse, we can use the priestess purification spell, but I haven't learned the purification spell yet. I may need to ask my mentor for help." "Purification spell." Hefels nodded. "Okay, then go. Tell your mentor that I, Tiger King Hefels, owe him a favor." Missoya nodded and turned to leave. She had no way of dealing with High Firth's condition, so she could only ask her mentor for help. Hefels turned around and glanced at Fresno. He snorted coldly. "It's all your fault." He had slapped him to vent his anger, but now he had to figure out what the curse was about. "Boss, it wasn't me, it was Ron." Fresno took a step back and stammered. Hefels frowned. "Ron? Who is he? I recognize most of the people in the academy who have some strength, but I don't think I've heard of this name before. Could he be a new student?" Fresno replied, "Yes, boss. That Ron is a new student. He just came to the academy a few days ago." "Oh right, he's also a necromancer." Hefels's heart skipped a beat. He turned around abruptly. "What? Say that again? Necromancer? It was actually a necromancer who beat him up to this state?" Yes. Fresno's confidence faltered. Hefels shook his head and slowly turned around. "Impossible, a necromancer can't possibly have such strength." Fresno panicked. "Boss, it's true." As he spoke, he recounted the whole story of the conflict between High Firth and Ron. "Boss, many of the new students at the scene saw it. It was that Ron who beat High Firth to this state. I'm not lying to you." Fresno added fuel to the fire as he spoke. After Hefels heard this, his face turned completely gloomy. "It doesn't matter if he's a necromancer or not. This new student is too arrogant. Everyone knows that High Firth is my younger brother. I won't let anyone who dares to touch my brother off. Not to mention an ordinary new student, even if it's the Balrogs Academy's first Holy Knight Mocklin, I'll still meet him. Yes, tear this guy into pieces. Frazino cried out in agitation. He had been slapped by Heifels because of the incident with Highfirth, so he hated Ron, who had caused all this. He did not dare to bare his fangs at Heifels. Heifels glanced at him. I'm avenging my brother, why are you so excited? What were you doing in the beginning? Frazino was at a loss for words. After he sent Godely back, he had no interest in watching the duel between the two. In his mind, Ron was no match for Highfirth at all. He was happy to be free and went straight back to his dormitory. At this moment, Heifels turned around, giving Frazino a fright. Heifels' face was distorted with anger. Frazino had never seen Heifels reveal such a terrifying expression. Chapter 93. Dealing with Firth High was a simple task. With Ron's current strength, it was a piece of cake. As for Firth High's current situation, he would be fine as long as he rested for a while. He took out the key and opened the door of the dormitory. As soon as the door opened, Ron was stunned by the scene in front of him. Search for the latest updates here. The dormitory was in a mess. There were sundries everywhere. Equipment, weapons, clothes, boots, and so on were scattered all over the floor. Fat Kid roared, Lantry, where is my dagger? Hurry up and find it for me, Kid roared as he put on the ill-fitting clothes. Karachi was rummaging through the cabinet. Brother, where is the magic earring I bought last time? Where did you throw it? Pastor Rum was wearing heavy armor, half of his head peeking out from the collar. Lantry said, Fifth brother, my shield, where is my shield? Didn't I put it here last time? Seeing Ron open the door, those people turned their heads and stared at him like he was a monster. Pornographic novels. Ron's husband, the monk, was confused. He looked at his shocked roommates and asked, What's wrong with you guys? Look at you guys, are you going to fight? Fat Kid couldn't believe his eyes. He quickly stepped forward and carefully checked Ron's body from head to toe. Then he patted him on the shoulder and finally pinched his face. I'm not dreaming, am I? You actually came back unscathed? Ron was even more confused. Why can't I come back? What the hell is going on here? At this time, Lantry also came over. Ron, didn't you say that Firth High was looking for you? Why did you come back unscathed? Ron didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Why do you all seem to be hoping that something happened to me? Firth High was looking for me, but I'm fine. Karachi's eyes widened in disbelief. How can you be fine? Although High Firth is a freshman, he relies on his brother's influence to stir up trouble everywhere. I heard that he beat up a senior a few days ago. This guy is really bad. Ron was indignant and then asked, By the way, why do you all look like you're facing a great enemy? Jida giggled. Isn't this all for you? We heard that High Firth was looking for you, so we immediately prepared to save you. Looking at the mess here, Ron understood everything. They were all wearing full sets of equipment to help him fight. Actually, their friendship wasn't that deep. After all, Ron had only known them for a few days. At this moment, the door of the girls' room creaked open, and Aurora, dressed in martial attire, walked out of the room. When she saw Ron, she was a little surprised and asked, Are you okay? Ron nodded. I'm fine. Aurora breathed a sigh of relief. That's good. Ron's eyes were a little red. He could feel his roommate's concern for him. He really didn't make a mistake coming to room 302. At this moment, Fatty Gid suddenly punched Ron's body. Ron cried out in pain. Ouch! Jida giggled and said, Not bad. You're fine. Ron couldn't help but feel angry. You just want to see if I'm injured. You don't have to use so much strength. I don't have a good physique like Lantry. I can't take a punch from you. Jida only smiled mischievously. By the way, why did High Firth let you go? Aurora asked. Ron shrugged. It's nothing. He talked to me about something and asked me to go to the duel arena. After that, he came back. Lantry was stunned. It's that simple? Ron replied, It's that simple. Right at this moment, the door to room 302 was suddenly pushed open, and a fiery red figure stumbled in. It was Man and I, who had a beautiful face and a devilish figure. At this moment, her face was filled with anxiety. Not good. Outside. There are a lot of people outside. They looked at each other. What do you mean by a lot of people? You guys look out the window? Manny said breathlessly. Aurora quickly ran to the window and pulled open the curtains. Everyone squeezed to the window and looked out. At first glance, everyone was shocked. They saw a large group of people outside. They were as dark as a dark cloud. They were all senior students, and these people's faces were not unfamiliar to this group of senior students. Jida was shocked. What's wrong with them? Who are they here for? Aurora's eyes were sharp. She saw the leader at a glance, and her pupils shrank. Heefles? This resounding name exploded in everyone's hearts. They all looked at Ron at the same time. Just now, his younger brother was looking for Ron, and now he was here with people. Could it be that this matter had something to do with him? Aurora asked directly, Ron, did you do something to Firth High? This was also the question in everyone's hearts. When she asked this question, Aurora also felt that it was ridiculous. Ron was a useless necromancer. How could he do anything to Firth High, who was an intermediate professional? Even if he wanted to, he didn't have the ability. It was more likely that the situation was reversed. However, the next answer surprised everyone. Ron shook his head and said, It's nothing. That guy was too arrogant. I just taught him a lesson. Well, that guy wanted to sneak up on me, so I knocked him out. He'll wake up in 2 days. The shock on everyone's faces turned into sluggishness. Ron touched his head. What's wrong? Why are you looking at me like that? Then, he touched Jida's forehead. Second fifth brother, how are you? Do you have a fever? Or are you not feeling well? Jida angrily slapped his hand away. You're the one who's having a fever. Everyone's gaze gradually changed. How could someone who could knock Firth High unconscious be an ordinary person? Manny stuttered as she asked, Ron, did you really do this? Ron nodded. Yes, Aurora took a deep breath. This is really too unbelievable. As she said that, she looked Ron up and down a few times. She thought that this guy's strength was a mystery. She had to find out more about him when she had the chance. The ranking battle in 3 months, downstairs, a few hundred students had surrounded the entire dormitory building. Below them was a huge mass of black heads. Their faces were filled with anger. An audacious new student had actually beaten up Boss Heefles's own brother. How could this be allowed? They had to teach this arrogant guy a good lesson so that he would have eyes when he walked around the campus in the future. He would know who he could offend and who he could not. Frezino had a flattering expression on his face. He was completely different from the arrogant person he had been in front of Ron earlier. Boss, how about we rush in now and catch that guy called Ron and beat him up? Heefles snorted coldly and rolled his eyes at him. Are you stupid? Rush in? With so many people using their chi and magic, this building will definitely collapse. When that happens, are you going to pay for it or am I? Can't you use your brain? Frezino was scolded by Firth High until he could not raise his head. His face was red as he said softly, Then what do we do? What do we do? Heifers sneered. Force him out. I don't believe that this guy is a coward. If he really is a coward and forces me into a corner, I'll find him even if I have to tear down this house. Yes. Frezino nodded his head like a chicken pecking at rice. At this moment, 2 graceful figures appeared at the back of the group. One was dressed in leisurely leather armor, while the other was dressed in soft magic robes. The 2 great beauties stood under the bright sunlight, looking very lovely and moving. Shea snorted coldly. I knew it. Heifels won't let this go so easily. If that's the case, then that guy isn't Heifels, Kadena sighed. Poor little necromancer. He's in trouble now. With so many students here, even a master would have a headache. Shea rolled her eyes and thought for a while before saying seriously, if that's the case, let's go back and call for help. I don't believe that Heifels can be a tyrant in the Balrafax Academy. Kadena looked at her as if she was looking at a stranger. Shea touched her face hesitantly. There was nothing wrong. She hurriedly asked, "What's wrong? Is there something on my face?" Kadena reached out and touched Shea's beautiful and smooth forehead. She nodded and said, "Yes, you're not sick. This means that you're speaking normally now." Shea rolled her eyes at her. "You're the one who's sick." Kadena looked at Shea seriously for a while. After a long time, she suddenly burst out, "Sister Shea, have you fallen in love with that guy named Ron?" Shea heard this and almost couldn't catch her breath. You, what did you say?" "I fell in love with him? I fell in love with him?" Kadena tilted her head. "That's possible. The Shea I know has never been like this. Why do you seem to have changed today? Usually, you're not interested in fighting and killing between students, but now you're so interested in a new student. Let me guess. Did you lose to Ron before? Although you're not convinced, you're convinced in your heart and can't help but fall in love with him. Nonsense." Shea's face turned red and she immediately denied it. Kadena smiled slyly. "Sister Shea, I've read a lot of psychology books. They say that when a woman is defeated by a man, it's like she's been raped. She can't help but feel like she's been conquered. In the end, she can't help but fall in love with the rapist. By the way, there are many examples like this. In the legend, the wife of the great sword sage Chaikizi was also a proud and arrogant person. After being defeated by him, she couldn't help but fall in love with the sword sage Chaikizi." Katina was unceasingly touting her research theories, but Shea's face was flushed red. Go. What do you mean by conquering or raping? See if I don't tear your mouth apart. Am I, Shea, the kind of person who would casually fall in love with someone? There's already someone's shadow in my heart. Shea was talking about the first paladin of the Balrog's Academy, Mocklin. However, Mocklin liked Kadena. Shea took a deep breath. The shame of failure must be washed away by me. Before that, I won't allow anyone to hurt him. If that's the case, my revenge will be meaningless. Kadena nodded like a chicken pecking rice. Yes. Sister Shea has to take revenge herself. She can't let others do it. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.